You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 486, our coverage of the Mandalorian Season 3 in a tried and true tradition that we call the Final Hype. So if you've never been to one of these episodes before, thank you for being here and listening. We actually take a lot of the stuff that's come before all the news briefs and releases, some of the clips. We talk about the total number of shows, who's writing, who's directing, getting you guys hyped up for Mandalorian Season 3, which at this point, I don't know that anybody needs any additional hype given how much there already is, but this begins a roadshow of live shows that we've got planned here over the next 5 days, culminating in our coverage of the first episode of Season 3, which is coming just like 4 days from now, this Wednesday. So, and to do all this with me is none other than my co-host. Welcome to the show, Jonesy. Jonesy, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, man. This is really exciting. We're only a handful of days away before the premiere. I mean, gosh, it just feels like it feels like it's been forever since we've had Mandalorian, right?
So what was it? 2020 was when the last episode of Season 2 premiered on December 18th, 2020, which is just mind-blowing because it feels like forever. It's been over 2 years now.
Right. I mean, we just did our 1 year later episode for Book of Boba Fett back in December. So it was 2021 since Book of Boba Fett started, and we're in 2023. It just feels like it's been ages. So
yes,
this is long overdue. It's super exciting to be able to come back here and start to revisit these characters and kind of shake off some of the dust. I was getting ready for the Patreon show tomorrow. We're going to do the top 3 for Season 2. Mm-hmm. And just going through that whole season, just all the things that were jam-packed into those 8 chapters as well. So it's really exciting to revisit some of that and even pull stuff back from the first season and even Book of Boba Fett now. I mean, StarWars.com is even bridging all of these as just one Mando verse, right?
Right.
So it's all one story, as we've kind of talked about for a while now. So it's really interesting to see how everything can play back in and come into this season and then what might come after this as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny too, as I was kind of doing again as part of the research going through it. I mean, it's only 16 episodes, which sounds kind of trivial, right? Because you think about we're used to seasons of television being, 18, 24 episodes. And yet in those 16 episodes, they are pretty dense in terms of the mythology. For gosh sakes, we've had Luke Skywalker show up in these episodes, right? So, I mean, you can't get more steeped in the mythology than somebody like Luke Skywalker making a presence. But there is so much that, it's been touched on throughout both of these seasons that I think is going to play into Season 3 in a lot of different ways. And of course, we got to go back and kind of, pat ourselves on the back here about talking about how this is what we really wanted, even back from Season 1. We were looking forward to, before we had any inclination where this whole series was going to go, I think we were begging, rooting, willing, prayers, seances, whatever we were doing to get to this point where we are going to go back to Mandalore, because it felt like it just needed to happen. We've never really had that story, at least, we've never had that story live action, but even in written form, it's been few and far between before we've actually gotten to see some of that stuff.
And that's what's the really cool thing about this series, and I think this season in particular, is you're right, we are writing the mythology now. We're not going back and trying to uncover things that have happened or anything like that. It feels like we are building this now as we go.
Yeah.
Even the original trilogy in Star Wars, it felt like it was kind of a story from the past that we were bringing in. The way that they just, even when you preface that, from a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago, this feels different than that. This feels like, no, we are writing this as we go. We are part of like the scribe that's documenting this for future generations. So it's a really different vibe than some of the other content that we've had. So I really like that. I think now that we're going to Mandalore, this feels like we are doing something. We're going to grab the past. We're going to understand more about what happened, Purge and all that good stuff, and that I have 1,000 tears. But now we're going to push that forward and say, what is really there? What does it mean to be Mandalorian? All of these great questions that keep coming up from the trailers and everything else. And we're going to get some of those answers this season. That's just really exciting.
Yeah. So before we get into all of that, let's, I think you wanted to say thank you to a few fine folks some of which are actually here with us tonight.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about people that we are super thankful for are now part of the tribe members: Mike, Rob, Lauren, Dante, Riss, Justin, Chuck, Mandan, Daz, Isabella, and Uncle Leon. Delusions of Grandeur tier, Rod, Kathy, and Hard Counter. Of course, these are all of our Patreon members. If you are curious about Patreon, and everything starts at just $1 for early release, $2 if you'd like access to the special content, as well as some other tiers if you'd like to maybe join us for a show like we're doing for tomorrow with the top 3. CantinaCast.com/Patreon is where you can go find all of that information out. Again, just taking a look, we really do appreciate it. We just appreciate it that you're here. CantinaCast.com/YouTube is where you can find us on the live stream. So if you're listening to this after the fact, we are live. It's a Saturday night here. We're going to be live on Sunday. We're going to be live on premiere night, Wednesday, March 1st. For the first episode or for chapter 17. So you can come out, visit us, get involved in the chat. We got lots of people right now. We got Lauren, Nase, Sky, Alex, Jonathan, Qui-Gon Jade, Dale, Ben, and Jordan out there already talking. There's a lot of people in the background. So again, a lot of enthusiasm. Lauren's already stirring the pot with Frog Lady and everything else. So I mean, you're missing the fun if you're not joining us and you have the ability to. So please come out and check it out. CantinaCast.com/YouTube. And you can subscribe, hit the little notification bell, and we'll let you know whenever we're live.
So I will try to get to any questions that you guys might have in the chat. So feel free to throw those in there. We'll pop them up and try to answer them. I have a feeling some of the questions that come up from our audience, our live audience, and are probably going to be touched on at some point. So if I don't get to your question immediately, it's because we probably have it in the show notes, or we're going to get to it here in just a little bit. So with that, let's get into talking about the final hype. And so we usually start with the tail of the tape, which is kind of like the background, production stuff, everything that we know about the show going into this. And so total of 8 episodes. So no surprise, very consistent with what we got with season 1, season 2, starting with chapter 17, which I still feel like it's probably chapter 20 or 19 if you add in the Book of Boba Fett episodes in there. But it's chapter 17 is what we're going to start with. 1 episode per week. So that's different because they were doubling up on episodes last year. We've seen it with the Bad Batch, some of the other series, the Kenobi series, right? But this is only going to be 1 per week, which I think makes sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really interesting about it is that there's no way they could have done this right now with Bad Batch going on at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, I know in their meetings, they're like, you know what? If we do this, Cantina Cast is just going to keel over. I don't think they can survive.
Right, yeah.
It was in the writing meeting. I just know it, the release schedule. Uncle Bob was there. Bob Iger, of course, our longtime friend.
Yeah.
So I just knew they were looking out for us here. But no, it makes sense. I mean, we're gonna go 8 weeks with this. It's going to take us right into Star Wars Celebration, which of course is going to be super exciting for the folks there because that opens some doors, maybe some opportunities to see that finale a little bit early.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, that's kind of exciting for them as well. And so, yeah, it just makes a lot of sense. And, it's a great time to be a Star Wars fan. Lots of stuff coming your way.
Yep. And this one, so now, of course, in these episodes, we're not going to get into spoilers, right? A lot of everything we're going to talk about is either stuff that's been released officially, either through interviews and that sort of thing from Disney. So we're not going to, in fact, I don't even have any spoilers going into this, which is kind of rare.
Right.
So they've done a pretty good job of keeping the lid closed on what's happening. So there is one thing that I do just kind of want to mention. It hasn't been officially confirmed. This is about the runtime for episode 1. Chapter 17, the first episode. There's been a lot of discussion around this the last couple days, but we're looking at about 35 minutes is kind of what people are reporting. Again, nothing official. How do you feel about 35 minutes? I think some folks were like, oh man, I thought this was going to be an hour. I thought it'd be 45 minutes or something more substantial. I don't have a problem with 35 minutes personally, but what do you think?
Well, I think like you said this at the top of the show, they've been able to really make these dense episodes or dense chapters every time that, regardless of how long it was. And when I was doing the rewatch for season 2, not all of them were all of that long. It all still felt very full. They all felt very full length, if you will. And they didn't feel like we shorted any part of the story as they went through it. So I think, again, if it's moving, with these first, when you have a premiere, you want it to be this really big, full, really grab you and just want to shake you and say, hey, we're here. This is what you're going to expect. It's going to be fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Length time, the runtime it doesn't matter, right? It just doesn't matter. It's what they do with that time that matters most, and how they decide to come out of the season is I'm actually very interested in where they would start with this season, because we know we had Book of Boba Fett. We know where they kind of left. We know with Din Djarin and Grogu, reunited and all that good stuff. Yeah, but where is this? We know this has some amount of time, removed from season 2, but with Book of Boba Fett and all of that, there's a lot of question marks. So again, reestablishing where these characters at, I think is easy to do because we have an idea of where they've been, but we'll have to catch some of the audience up, but not in a way that's, grudging along and really treading through a lot of what we already know and kind of re-exposition, if you will. I think we're going to jump kind of right into it.
Yeah, and I'm with you too. And just kind of it's a nice segue into we'll come back to this, the tale of tape here in just a second. But there have been some, I think it was Jon Favreau, as recently as 2 days ago. So this is, I think, Friday afternoon, Friday at some point, he was doing an interview. He did mention and confirm that we are going to get some kind of a clip, some kind of a video, catch you up on what's going on, which will include some of the footage from the Book of Boba Fett. Because for most people, well, I'm going to ask you a question after this, but for most people, or I guess some people that did not watch the Book of Boba Fett, they would come in scratching their heads going, what the heck happened, right? He left Luke Skywalker and suddenly they're back together. And what happened? There's a lot of questions that would be there. I really just question the question about whether or not who's watching this series that didn't watch the Book of Boba Fett, right? I mean, I get there's people out there, but I think by and large, they timed that kind of perfectly so that if you wanted Star Wars, well, Book of Boba Fett was really the only thing that was on live. So not saying you were forced to watch it, but I think most people caught up on that for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, and Mandalorian was doing all of this beforehand. I'm trying to remember if Book of Boba Fett did as well. I think they did, but in Mandalorian season 2, they always had a catch up before every episode because there was a lot of things they were referencing from the first season as well that they would bring in to those just introductions, right? Here's what you guys type of thing, because it would switch the stories and we were moving around a little bit from here and there. And so it was relevant to go and pick, this is the Moff Gideon side of things where we didn't have, as we got back into a Moff Gideon, it had been a few episodes. Right. So those types of things make a lot of sense. There's a lot of precedence for all of that. So not surprising. And again, every episode will probably have some level of that just to make sure people aren't lost. I'm with you. Everybody's watching the show. There might be some new joiners. I think, there's probably going to be new joiners, especially
I would imagine.
Some audiences have gotten a little bit older and now that they can watch this. Maybe they didn't watch it before, or maybe they're just now getting into it.
Yeah.
But again, we've had 16 episodes plus Book of Boba Fett, so I think there's a lot of it's a good thing for us to do a catch up, just a little refresh every time you go into an episode, especially if it's something we haven't gone back to or we've revisited in a while. And I think it's always the lore stuff. I think it's really important for us to go and recap a little bit, just to again reestablish where we're at, like where we've been and where we're at in this moment, so that we understand where that character might still be. And pick up on all the subtleties of where they are now that may have happened in between and off screen from where we've seen them last.
So you're saying we're not going to get a montage of the events that happened with Frog Lady and Frogman. Is that what you're saying?
I think we're going to get a montage of Grogu eating all the eggs and what happened. Yes.
This is all you need to know going into season 3. He likes to eat eggs or small babies, whatever the case may be.
And somehow he stole them all the time. Like he always had one. It was amazing how many times he ended up with an egg that
he didn't learn his lesson, by the way. There were people saying, he learned it. No, he did not. He was still eating them at the very end.
Yep.
Okay. Let's just be clear about that.
Yeah. He still slipped one in there. I don't even know how he was getting it, but he was. He was using the Force.
That's what it's the will of the Force
that is how the Force works, apparently.
Yeah. Okay. So back on track. So 35 minutes is kind of what we're reporting in terms of, or what's being reported for this chapter 17, episode 1, season 3, chapter 22. And I don't know if there's anything here to discuss, but I thought it was interesting. Chapter 22 will air 2 days before Star Wars Celebration, and chapter 23 will air 2 days after Star Wars Celebration, which of course is in London this year. What is it? April?
Yeah, 7th through 9th.
7th through 10th. Yeah. So I don't, generally speaking, I don't think they necessarily timed it around that. I was just going to make the comment that I wonder if the attendees at Star Wars Celebration will get like we got, where that night of, right, Wednesday night, Thursday night, they get to actually go out and see it, 4 or 5 days before it's released to the masses, which I thought would be kind of interesting. But coincidentally enough, though, here is one thing that's interesting about that episode. Chapter 23, at least, is the Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni episode. So they were both the writers on that one. So I would imagine those, anytime you've gone back and look at season 1, season 2, Rebels, throw anything out there that Filoni's done, when his name's attached to it directly like this, and somebody like Jon Favreau's attached to it, we're going to get the deeper mythology kind of episodes, Jedi, the way the Force works, all of that. So any thoughts around that? You think that's still going to happen?
Yeah, I think it's very real. I mean, and again, we know that you could speculate what that episode is going to be, quite a bit too, because we know Ahsoka's coming later this year. We know that we might see Sabine get pulled into. Do you want to tease any of that? Usually those are a little further out than this, but you have a lot of connectivity to that right now and a lot of energy behind that. And so it makes a lot of sense that they would get a preview of this episode. I think they will. I think they'll get to watch it before everyone else. They've been very good at in the celebrations in the past, and we've complained about this in some ways, that they're actually quite good at controlling this content getting outside of those walls. And they don't let it be simulcast across even the event. Like, you have to be in certain rooms to be able to get these previews. And so that they would do that and still be able to capture that spirit, even if information about it would leak out. They've been very good at managing that content and at least the visual aspects of it, even if people are out there explaining it. Again, it's only a couple of days in advance, so I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Sure.
It's not like, and I misspoke before, I said it was the finale they would get access to. That's the week following. But I think
after.
But I think this is going to be an important episode. We always assume that when Filoni's involved.
Yep.
And again, this might be the setup episode, that brings us into Ahsoka, the series.
Yeah. Okay. Well, more on that in just a little bit. Lastly, just as a reminder, the filming began for season 3 in October of 2021, finished in March of 2022. So we're a year after this had already filmed, which is
sounds familiar,
crazy
right?
to think about.
Sounds familiar though, right? This is what Tony Gilroy's been saying about Andor.
Yeah.
It takes a few months for us to actually go out there and film it and do the production side of it, but then it takes us a whole nother year to have this ready for you to sit in your living room and watch it.
All right, let's talk about the directors now. So, returning directors, Bryce Dallas Howard. I think everybody should be excited about that. She's done an amazing job. Rick Famuyiwa is back as well. This is now his 3rd year directing episodes. And Carl Weathers is back as well. So those 3. No Dave Filoni episodes and no Jon Favreau directed episodes. What do you make of that?
Probably not a bad thing for Filoni directing.
Oh,
well, I mean,
he was fine.
He got better.
He got better.
Yeah, he got better. But I think Filoni was a little bit.
He stuck the landing on that 2nd episode.
He did. But his was a little bit growing pains, maybe, or just getting his, getting.
Well, we talked about it. It's the transition from. I mean, all the pieces are there to be successful if you're coming from something like animation, but it is a different medium, and you've got to kind of find your place in all that. And I think he has. So
but
tough love.
They're bringing in top talent here, right? I mean, Bryce Dallas Howard. I don't know if she's just doing 1 or if she's doing 2. And Rick Famuyiwa is another strong one as well. Carl Weathers, I'm a little hit and miss on, not love hate, but just kind of hit and miss, warm and a little bit cooler on some of his episodes. But
I like his. They remind me of like old school. Not. I don't want to do. I don't want to sound ageist here, but he does have this kind of old school like
more of a
approach.
classic. Yeah, it's kind of
more of a classic approach. That 70s, 80s kind of approach, rather than the nouveau kind of avant-garde that we see sometimes with directors.
Right. But we talked about this before. Rachel Morrison, she was the cinematographer for Black Panther. And so just that visual aspect and how that was shot is really interesting to bring in and have a different, fresh take when it comes to Star Wars and Mandalore in particular. Peter Ramsey with Into the Spider-Verse.
I mean, that's
people's mecca of Spider-Man at this point. Right. Like in the movies. I mean, as well as the Marvel movies have done, Into the Spider-Verse is the one that seems to be universally loved by all for a variety of reasons. And so that Peter Ramsey is going to be involved. And again, taking really unique and different ways of filmmaking ideas and how do they apply that to Star Wars is really cool. Now, Lee Isaac Chung is a name I'm not as familiar with Minari, but I'm not sure if did you do any further research about some of that or check that out?
I did not. No, I didn't. And you touched on something here. I think what we would like to see is for all of the directors to kind of bring their own personality, right? We want to see their techniques. I think we saw that with Robert Rodriguez during the Book of Boba Fett. Right. We've seen it with all the directors here so far that we've mentioned. But without leaving the canvas of what we know Star Wars to be, right? We don't want something that looks completely, disorienting or kind of, pulls us out of what we're used to seeing.
Right.
There's a happy balance between there. And I think so far they've done a pretty good job in this series, particularly in The Mandalorian, of bringing in directors, allowing them to have their space to kind of, show their talents, put their mark on Star Wars, but not pull us out of the mythos, right? And what we're kind of used to, the canon that's been set up.
And this is why I like that we have a single writer that permeates every episode with Jon Favreau, right? You have one creative direction for the whole thing, even if he brings in others to help on certain episodes or to do other things with them. I think when you have that consistency and you have that type of, just that common thread through all of it, it does help, even though you get some visual elements a little bit different. At least you have that stability within the episode And
Yep.
usually that helps you set your tone and everything else, right? So those things are very consistent. You're not getting these wild swings like we've seen in some other content, like in Bad Batch, right? So Bad Batch, sometimes we talked about this past week, this last episode just felt different all of a sudden,
Yeah.
right? It's a different structure, different crew, a little bit different just vibe to the whole thing. And that's not always a bad thing, but you can always see how that can take you out of that moment and make you think about things other than the characters what you have on screen. So I like that we do have the consistent writing, through Favreau, even if he's getting advice and getting other influence from others, he's the primary direction on that.
Yeah, just quickly, a couple comments in the chat tonight. Dale's with us, says, BDH, Bryce is so nice. Yeah, she's a fan favorite for sure.
Yep.
And Miss Sunflower says, Minari, that episode is probably emotional then. So I'm assuming she saw it. It was maybe an emotional movie. I don't know, honestly, but that would be kind of cool to bring some like emotional weight. Not that we need it with this one, because I think we've had it, but I mean, the more the merrier, right? Let's give us that kind of a sad tale, especially when we get to Mandalore and Sonari and all of the Night of 1,000 Tears. I mean, I can see some potential there to bring kind of weave and wax some emotional, storytelling.
Yeah, and you talk about different visual elements and stuff. I mean, they tried some of this with Book of Boba Fett too, with the flashing of the green and the digital noise, all of that type of thing. And we could argue how well some of that worked, but you have some of those options with some of these flashbacks and these montage type of things that they've worked into Mandalorian.
Montage? Did you say montage?
I said
we're going to talk about montage a little bit later. Yep. Okay, so you mentioned the writing, which is a good segue. Again, so Jon Favreau wrote all 8 episodes, although he did bring somebody in to help out. That was a gentleman by the name of Noah Clore and Dave Filoni. So Dave Filoni and Noah Clore both collaborated with him on episodes 4 and 7. But for the most part, this is Jon Favreau's writing, which has been the case, right? This has been his baby, his concept, his big idea from the very beginning. So no surprise there. I would expect somebody like Dave Filoni to come in to kind of help navigate through the mythos and kind of be that, here's the voice of George Lucas. Here's the voice of how the Force works. I mean, he is the most person, attuned to the George Lucas base of mythology. So that makes sense. And Clore was a staff writer on Book of Boba Fett. So this isn't his first foray into Star Wars. He was already kind of a part of this whole little, I'm going to call him a gang, because a lot of these folks have been working together on other stuff. As I was kind of whipping through internet IMDb, you notice that there's like 1,000 points to Dave Filoni on a lot of different, I'm sorry, I get the names mixed up, Jon Favreau, with other things that he's producing and directing outside of Star Wars. So he's keeping all of the folks that he knows pretty well, and they're all kind of helping and contributing to this. So from there, let's talk about the casting. So I think this is all pretty much we would expect. I mean, there's a couple surprises in here. Pedro Pascal, we know who he is. Grogu as himself. Giancarlo Esposito as Moff Gideon. Carl Weathers as Grief Karga. Katie Sackhoff, Bo-Katan. Emily Swallow as the Armorer. Can't wait to hear about or talk about her. Ahmed Abtahi, I hope I said that right. Dr. Pershing, which is great. He had such a small role, and we're going to get into them a little bit in more details here. But he had such a small role. It's really cool to see that he was part of the longer plan here. So we'll see where that goes. Paul Sun-Hyung Lee as Carson Teva. This is now 4 episodes now that he's been minor roles, but coming back. And so I want your take on this one. We can kind of, we'll come back to this, but I want to just mention Christopher Lloyd and Tim Meadows. So Christopher Lloyd of Back to the Future fame and all kinds of other, he's been a billion movies. Right. And then Tim Meadows, who's always going to be, he's done a lot of things post Saturday Night Live, but I'll always remember him for Saturday Night Live. But interesting that those 2 characters were brought in for the season. And we'll speculate just a little bit later on what they could possibly be doing here. And then Babu Fafrik as himself. Right. So that kind of rounds out the cast. Any comments without getting into the details here on those?
No, we'll talk more about the characters as we go on through the show. But yeah, I mean, still just a great cast. I like the stability of the cast too. We keep coming back to the same characters. We don't always introduce a lot of new ones in and out.
Yep.
And so it's always great to have that stability there too. And again, I'm with you. I'm glad that Dr. Pershing has had more of a role, and even with Carson Teva being able to be worked more into all of this. And we know they were going in a different direction, previously, but the way that these characters are presented and the way that they've been performed, I think has been really spot on. So they've really done a great job with casting here, and I'm glad to see that's going to continue without a whole lot of change. I think this is not a bad thing.
Okay. Well, and I would agree. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but the very last thing I want to talk about before we get into the core and talk about speculation and storyline, all that stuff. The very last thing is the music. So
Yeah, that's what's
Ludwig
different.
Garrison has been the music composer for both seasons 1, season 2, Book of Boba Fett, and I would say I'm a huge fan. Like it was very interesting. I went back and listened to some of the shows that we had done as this stuff was coming out, and we were kind of like a little taken back. I think as much as most Star Wars fans were. We had John Williams for the longest time, Kevin Kiner as for the longest time, right? They kind of had a very unique style, and Kiner's was really just an offshoot of what Williams was doing. But here comes, Ludwig Göransson, and suddenly we're getting all kinds of different sounds. It doesn't, I mean, it feels like it shouldn't be Star Wars, but it is Star Wars. And now I've gotten really used to it. I was looking forward to it. But this year, he's out. So he's done something out. I mean, he's got a ton of projects that he's working on right now. This has really contributed to his success. But Joseph Shirley is the person that's now coming in to replace him. Joseph Shirley has worked with him before. In fact, he contributed to a couple pieces, I think, in Book of Boba Fett, and maybe Mando. I forget now. No, it was seven episodes of Mando total.
Right.
So he has been working close to Ludwig in terms of the music. But do you feel like he's going to step out of what we know, or do you think like it's going to be kind of like, par for course and familiar?
I don't know, because as we're rewatching season two had such a variety, and there were, in my notes for tomorrow night's show, I have a lot of notes in there about the music and how much I loved it and how different it was. And, kind of this rock metal guitar type of vibe, and I don't know if that was coming from Ludwig or if it was coming from Joseph Shirley or who, but I'm okay. I mean, we want to see more artists get involved and see what they have, because we don't know what we're missing until they present it to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get nervous. I mean, I'm with everybody else. I get nervous because music is so integral to what we view Star Wars and how much we enjoy Star Wars and how important it is to bringing it all together along with the sounds and the visuals. It's been as important, like you said, with John Williams, as any other element that George Lucas has ever done.
Yeah.
So it always feels a little uncomfortable when we have that kind of change, but I like that we've been exposed to some of his work before. We don't really know the extent of what that actually was. So let's give him a shot. Let's see how this works out. And we know there's a vibe that they need to hit with Mandalorian. We know Mandalorian already has a bit of a tonal element to it, a certain Western type of vibe. So those are the things we have to work within, but then we can evaluate, based on the scenes and everything else that we're in and the situations, and it'll take us on a bit of a new journey. So I'm willing to keep this with an open mind. I'm excited to hear what it is, a little bit nervous, but I think this could be a really good thing as well. We don't know what we don't know what we have until we actually see it or hear it in this case.
Yeah, I think for the stuff that's already been established by Ludwig, I think we can completely expect Joseph Shirley, to just continue that on, right? I don't think he's going to go make sweeping changes to the themes and that stuff. Where I was really kind of thinking about where are we going to kind of see his signature stamp? Like where is his music going to be exposed or signaled? And it's got to be, for me, it's going to have to be when we get to Mandalore, right? There's got to be some, like, we've had little bits and pieces of the music, but it feels like there is going to be some kind of a theme to Mandalore, whether it's ominous or, I mean, I don't know what that sounds like yet, but I have a feeling it's probably going to, it's going to be Joseph Shirley's, fingerprints all over. It's going to be his DNA. And that's where I think that'll be the make or break selling point for me in terms of whether or not I give this guy a thumbs up or thumbs down, because that's kind of even though I think for audiences who are not familiar with the animated series and coming into this and all they really know is Boba Fett from the show or the movies, there's a lot of mythology in Star Wars around the Mandalorians. And so it feels like there's got to be some care, right? That goes into how they approach the music and just the vibes of what that's going to be, especially now that the Empire has completely leveled it. I think it's going to get different. It should have a certain tone to it.
It is exciting, though, for an artist to be able to put their own stamp on it and have something unique about a certain season or a certain story arc or whatever it is, that then they have that opportunity to really shine and put forth their own influence into their material, have their, not just having to adapt and adopt what's come before them, but actually be able to do something very creative and new that's their style. Again, hopefully fitting within the overall narrative, but having, like you said, being able to say, this is my piece of work, this is my opus, type of moment for the season. I think is a great opportunity. So excited to hear where that takes us.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's the last piece on the music. Let's move now into, I guess, what we know. And so we'll get into the characters, some of the background setting. A lot of this, again, is going to be based on the trailers, interviews, articles that have been released here in the last week. I have to say the press release or the press junket for this one doesn't seem as like heavy. Right. It doesn't feel like they're out there, making the rounds daily, a week, 2 weeks prior to. And I guess they don't have to. Like I said, I mean, like, who the heck has not got Mando fever, or who the heck's not going to watch us because they didn't get their, 5 days of EW interview articles, leading up to the release. Right. So maybe then it's not necessary, but I just find it kind of weird that there hasn't been as much here lately than we've had historically for other Star Wars premieres.
All right, they had the big premiere last week, and as we get into premiere week this week, I imagine some of these interviews and the articles and the Vanity Fairs, we know we've got some special covers coming out as well. So I think those will start to come out. But you're right, a lot of this has been really just, YouTube clips and just other commercials, basically, for the content, which has not been, a couple little new things here and there, Grogu spinning in the chair, that type of thing, but not a whole lot of, variability to any of it or real new tidbits to really sink your teeth into and consider what's going on. So it has been a little bit interesting. It's been much more subdued, and I think than what we've had. But I'm also wondering if this might be, not to bring in kind of the outside part of all of this, but we know that Disney is going through a bit of a shift right now, trying to get its house back in order from a corporate structure and just a corporate strategy and how they want to carry these forward. So I don't know if that's having any kind of influence of what we're seeing here or not, either with a maybe more subdued strategy, a little more cost-effective strategy, putting a little less money into all of this because we know we have a tried and true property. Yes, we know it's going to be a home run, at least these early episodes. People will go watch, or what that might be. But I have a feeling we will see the media blitz come out this week. I think we'll see some energy pick up there, especially as we get more of the online articles coming out.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, not a red flag. I think for all the reasons you said, and the fact that, again, there's nobody that's still wondering, like, what is this Mando thing about? What do I need to know? It's already out there.
Well, I mean,
the juggernaut.
You're right, though. The interesting is, like, even with the artwork we've got for the show tonight, it's, Din Djarin holding the Darksaber. Mm-hmm. And to me, the Darksaber still has to have a certain mystique to it, and this mysterious value, to it. So why are we not playing some of that up as much? And I think Jon Favreau, we'll talk some of his comments here. Those things do come up. They are surfacing. But you're right, it doesn't seem to be just this media storm that we're used to.
Yeah. Okay, so the setting for season 3, as best we know it, at least for most, if not all of the episodes, seems to be Mandalore, right? This was all signaled back in season 2. We got more confirmation of that in the Book of Boba Fett. He's now an apostate like myself. And he's trying to get to Mandalore to cleanse, for his transgressions, right? Cleanse himself for having removed his mask because of the ancient ways. And so I'm with you. Like, we are probably, I would imagine we're going to get our little, here's what you need to know. Here's what you missed on the last episode of The Mandalorian. And they roll the credits and they roll the footage and we get caught up. And I think we're rolling right into Mandalore. Like, I don't see why at this point we would do anything else. Maybe there's a brief, we touch down, talk to Grief Karga prior to, but once we get to Mandalore, it feels like we're not leaving there, right? So it seems like they're going to wrap that stuff up. We're going to go right into it, and maybe that's where the cliffhanger is, right? The 35 minutes is probably enough time for us to kind of establish. Here's everybody that we need to know up front. Here's Grief Karga. Look, he's doing really well. He gets free fuel, whatever. We see the baby, and then he gets out there. It looks like hell, literally hell, and he walks up to the throne where, Bo-Katan is, and she says, I want to challenge. I'm making stuff up here, right? But I feel like that's probably enough to get going, because I don't know that we need any more than that. And we know that we're probably going to spend a lot of time on Mandalore because there's a lot of stuff that has to happen here. Yeah,
we presume that Bo-Katan is on Mandalore, or at least she's on the moon, or maybe Concordia, whatever. But I mean, I'm with you. I think that we don't dilly-dally around this. We jump right in at some point. Now, I don't know if it's going to be episode 1, like this first, or chapter 17, I guess. I don't know if we'll jump that immediately into it with no setup, I think. But I think the possibility is there. I mean, and this content is deep enough and rich enough to where I think that it has staying power once you establish that. But I'm with you. If we look at trailers and if we think trailers give you mostly things in the first half of a season, then what you're saying certainly has a lot of legs to it.
Yeah. Susan Smith says Jon Favreau and Pedro Pascal have been here in the UK this week promoting The Mandalorian on several TV shows. So, and yes, I think they were here in the US. I think they've made it out there to across the pond, so to speak, in doing that. So this is about right as far as where they're going. By the way, she corrected me. I left off Pelimato. So Amy Sedaris is Pelimato. That was not intentional, an oversight on my part, but she's in the trailer. She's in the trailer. See, now there's going to be conspiracy, and I guarantee you, like, give me 10 seconds, and you're going to get a comment in here from Lauren about how I don't love Pelimato or whatever. But it was
every other comment in the chat is about Pelimato.
Every other comment is about,
some of it more appropriate. Some of it more appropriate than others. Yeah,
exactly right. Some of it more appropriate, and that's why I've not been throwing them up. But thank you, Susan, for chiming in. Ben Stone says my biggest hope out of season 3 is a very deep dive into Mandalore. Man, I'm telling you, I think we're going to get it. I think you're going to be pretty happy. And if you're a Star Wars Rebels fan or a Clone Wars fan or just a Mandalorian fan, honestly, I think this is really going to be a big payoff for you in all 8 episodes, to be honest. There's just a lot of stuff here that needs to be discussed, talked about. And I think there's a lot of stuff that like somebody like Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau just want to get out there and say, look, this is what Mandalore is. It's not just Boba Fett from The Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. You know, there's a whole history here. And I think we were fortunate to see that in the Clone Wars, and we were fortunate to see that in Star Wars Rebels, but this is going to be the first view for a lot of folks on what these cultures are like, apart from what we've already seen in season 2.
Yeah, I mean, this is where we're going to really reestablish. I mean, and Jon Favreau has said this so many different times too, of what we can come to expect from these clans. We've seen them in pieces, right? We saw them as a covert at one point very early on in the first season. But ever since then, we just get these little pockets. We do get the Night Owls, but it's really through the lens of Bo-Katan still, right? It's just through Paz or the Armor. There's these other groups now that we're going to have to come and try to revisit, and we're going to find out just how different they all are and what their different perspectives on what it means to be a Mandalorian. And so those are the notes that Jon Favreau keeps giving to us throughout the interviews and throughout any of the articles that are being written. So I think, yeah, overall, though, if you're wanting Mando culture and Mando ways of life and, you know, a deep dive into all of that, within the context of how much time we have, I think you're hopefully, I think I'm going to be pretty satisfied with what we get.
Yeah, I think so too. A couple things. This was recently from the Empire Magazine interview that he did, which I've not had a chance to pick up. I understand there's more in written form. I would hope so, since people are buying it, but there's more in the written than there was released on the online interview. But I do want to talk about one quick thing, because it's a nice segue into some of the first questions that we got here. He says, this is Jon Favreau speaking. He says, there's a lot of Mandalorians that don't necessarily see eye to eye, and we've introduced them slowly, and you met them through individuals. Now we have a lot of people who are aware of one another, and push is coming to shove in a lot of ways. Just kind of as part of that same conversation, he says, this, as you can see from the trailer, talking about the scope, it's bigger, it's better, I should say. He went on to promise that there's a reckoning of various different Mando factions. Now, this is nothing new to the Mandalore culture, right? Going back even to the Old Republic, they've constantly been in a perpetual state of war. It wasn't until, at least from a canon perspective, it wasn't until Satine, so Bo-Katan's sister, until Satine Kryze came into power, did they go take this route of a pacifist life, right? A peaceful life. That didn't work out so well for them, right? Weapons are part of their culture. Weapons are part of their religion. This is just ingrained in them. And so they don't know any way. And so what we had, for anybody that's not up to speed, for what we've had in Mandalore are a number of tribes that have been constantly vying for power. Some get along with others for the most part, but there's factions out there. And there's a lot of different tribes out there with lots of different views, lots of different ways, right? We saw that more recently with the Children of the Watch, which is what Mando's part of. Quote, the ancient ways, right? That can't take your helmet off. They're the pilgrims. They're what would be a good word for them?
They're like the Puritans.
The purists.
Yeah.
The Puritans is probably a good word. Yeah. And then you've got people like Bo-Katan, who comes from a different faction, and she's got her Night Owls, and they're okay with taking off their helmets, and they're okay with, not following this. But there's so many different variations of clans and tribes that we're going to see. And they've been in a state prior to the Empire coming in. They were suddenly united through the Darksaber, Sabine Wren from Star Wars Rebels, who will be in the Ahsoka series, and Bo-Katan. And Bo-Katan got the Darksaber given to her. She did not win this in combat. And she proclaimed herself as kind of a leader. And she would seem like the natural fit, right? I mean, she was the sister of Satine. Satine had been killed. They didn't have a ruler. So why not? Why not just give her the Darksaber, let her rule? I think there were some factions that were like pretty okay with this. And I think there were a lot of them that were not okay with this because it did go against some kind of one of their primary laws or institutions of how somebody becomes the Mandalore. And so with the Darksaber being lost to the Empire, they're now in a state of no ruler, no leader. She feels like it should be her. Others feel like it should be them. On top of that, they're fighting amongst each other, and then they've been completely obliterated by the Empire, which kind of sets the stage because now you've got somebody like Din Djarin, who suddenly has the Darksaber, won in combat fairly, right? Should be the rightful leader, ruler of Mandalore, but he doesn't want it, right? He was so quick to just say, well, take the Darksaber, Bo-Katan. I don't want this. This is not what I came for, right? This is not my destiny. This is not my life. So it's a very interesting dynamic that we've got going on here. And when Mando shows up with that Darksaber, I think we're going to see some feuds, right? There's going to be some strife among a lot of the Mando clans.
Yeah, where you start with Paz Vizsla, right? He thinks it's he's the rightful heir of it for his family because that's where it originates. That's the story. And I think you're right, though. I think there's going to be the same type of balance or the challenges that we saw in the previous content from, Clone Wars, is that there's this battle. Everybody thinks they should be the primary clan, right? And we're families' importance over time. They all have their own baggage, and they all have their own baggage against one another. So what is it going to take for them to be able to reunite and get it? And if Mandalore is such a wasteland, it begs the question about why would anybody want that, right? But again, Bo-Katan tells us in season 2, she goes, don't believe what you hear, don't believe what you see. Well, I guess more of what you hear, but go find out for yourself effectively. There's something more there than what you're being told and what you're being led to believe. So what is it that is so important about Mandalore that we don't know that she does? And then why is she not there unless there's something really happening underground that we need to see to really understand and believe? And so hopefully that's what we're going to see here. And that's what we're going to get.
Yeah. Ben says, Sabine giving the Darksaber to Bo has always seemed odd in hindsight now. Yeah, I didn't think much of it when it happened, right? In Star Wars Rebels, you're like,
it made sense.
Okay, yeah. Unite the clans. It was actually a really great moment when she does that too. Like she holds the lightsaber or the Darksaber up and everybody takes a knee and they vow their allegiance to her. Well, everybody there, let's just say that. Everybody there, wasn't everyone.
Well, I mean, go back and think about it. I mean, Sabine wasn't going to be the leader. She didn't have the respect that she had, even though the Wren family was an important family. How she had it and what she represented and some of her sins as well just didn't work. So for her to bring someone in, Bo-Katan was an honorable family. Again, what you said with Satine, it just, all those things made sense, and she was a very strong person to be able to lead them. And I think some of it is like, I want to hear that story too. That story needs to come out. Bo needs to tell us what happened within all this context, not through the armorer's lens, but through Bo-Katan's lens here.
Yeah, and I want to get to that here a little bit when we talk about Bo-Katan and whether or not we'll actually see what transpired. My gut tells me we will. Okay, so let's get into some of the questions here. Let's talk about the Purge and the Night of 1,000 Tears, right? This was something that was shown to us in, now I'm forgetting, it was Book of Boba Fett, right, where we got this. Unfortunately, it wasn't in season 2 of Mandalorian. But if you had a chance to watch that, we got you got a couple different clips of the Empire coming in and what looks to be just bombing the hell out of Sundari and all of Mandalore and just leveling it to no end. Now, I think it's probably just safe to say that's all they did. I think when we were kind of speculating about what could have caused this much destruction, we were bringing in some stuff that happened during Star Wars Rebels, where Sabine Wren had created this like mass weapon of destruction that was able to go out and fry people wearing Beskar, right, from underneath, right? It was special tech that she was doing when she was working for the Empire. That's a long story. We're not going to talk about that right now. But do you think it's any more than that? Do you think they had some other kind of a special weapon that they used, or do you think it was just bombardment? Because we did see the bombers in that trailer. So it does sound like it was just conventional bombing of sorts from the Empire. Anything more there, though?
Well, we know they had troops on the ground, too, at least droids that were going through and finishing the job. So it seems like it was a full-scale assault and war on the Mandalorian people. I think the orbital bombardment and the bombing probably is a big chunk of it, but they had to go and finish the job. And this seems to be like from a top down, like even sub level. Like they went and the Empire really did a thorough job of cleansing all this to where the clans were afraid enough to scatter and not reform and to go into hiding, and to have to lick their wounds. So it seems like it was pretty thorough from top to bottom.
Yeah, and so in season 2 of The Mandalorian, we did get Bo-Katan kind of giving us some context as to what's been happening here recently. There's that one scene where I think it's in episode 3 of season 2 when it's when they're in the bar, I think, when they buy him a drink and he's eating soup or whatever it is.
Right.
And she talks about how all of their weapons and armor have been plundered. She doesn't say specifically. I think it's inferred that it is the Empire that's doing it, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are other groups that know that Mandalore, this wealth of armor and tech and weapons, has suddenly been exposed and opened up, right, by the Empire. You probably have all kinds of other raiders and pirates and everyone going in there and kind of taking everything. And she mentions that her mission, at least at that time, her and the Night Owls, were to go back. They were trying to gather up these weapons, use them against the Empire so that they could liberate Mandalore and put somebody back into the seat, the throne, as the leader. So I think there's one of the quick things. She says that Mandalorians are stronger together, right? That in a nutshell is kind of where we are. I mean, that's kind of setting the stage for what we're going to see in season 3.
Exactly. I mean, and then this is what the Empire's afraid of. I think in general, not just the Mandalorians, but just people in general. Their idea is to divide and conquer. You split people apart, because if they do unify, if they do organize, and if you have someone like the Mandalorian culture who is just predicated on battle and on honor and on, basically family. What more could you fight for than your family if you're all pulling in the same direction, you all had the same value, if you're all pulling, with the same goal in mind and pushing towards that direction.
Yeah.
And so it makes a lot of sense why the Empire would go in there and want to split everyone up and try to keep them warring and maybe even insert level of insurgency within the groups that did work well together, or the long-lasting families that did get along. And I think in the chat someone had mentioned before that the clans did support the Kree's line when the Darksaber was passed along, right? So again, what happened in the meantime that drove some of those wedges apart? Was it just what the Empire did, or were there other things in the meantime that also happened?
Yeah, I mean, I can see where she may have had some missteps, right? I think you're right.
Sure,
I mean, the Vizslas, they did pledge their allegiance as well. They were there, right? However, they could have, and I'm sure we'll get all this in season 3. Hopefully we'll get this in season 3, but they may have just been swept up in the moment and said, yeah, sure, we'll do it. And then, but still had a lot of doubt in their minds that it's not going to work out. And the minute she makes one misstep or something goes wrong, right, they're out. They're like, this is exactly why we weren't really on board with this to begin with, and et cetera, et cetera. You can see how they would get there pretty quickly, especially the Vizslas.
Is that tenuous agreement, right? That tenuous, coming together. It always feels like there's one little thing that will make the entire relationship fall apart.
Yeah.
And so, but again, I think we do need to see some of this stuff. I think from an audience perspective, I mean, you and I are very invested in this. Our folks in the live stream are very invested in all of this. We know a lot of all this, and we still don't have the answers. Imagine someone else coming into this series
right, yeah,
and feeling like, man, what the hell are they actually talking about? There's a lot of stuff back here, but what is the actual rub here? Why don't they like each other? How many groups are there? How big are they? And now we start to see all these different, color armors and everything else in the trailers and the teasers. And so what is it, and how do they all feel, and why do they feel the way that they do, especially if it's towards the Kree's family or the Kree's clan? I mean, that's the part that, and then what did Bo-Katan actually do? And so I think those are questions that must be answered. I think at some level, we have to get some expectation of an answer. And we have an opportunity here with Din Djarin, because he tends to go into these with a bit more of an open mind, even though he has his, he has, this is the way, and he subscribes to the ancient culture and the ancient ways.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy that is also willing to sit there and listen about why is it that we are operating this way? Why do people believe, she is the way that she is? And so I think that's a great opportunity for him to be the one to learn, especially if he's going to be the one to lead at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so I think those are the things that we need to understand. And what better character to pull all that information in than Din Djarin from Bo-Katan.
I got a question for you on that note. So do you think it would be enough for audiences, the general audiences, for them to come in, and I'm going to really oversimplify this, but if Bo-Katan comes out and says, look, there were a lot of us, we're a lot of different tribes, we have a history of war, and it's been prophesized, because it's essentially what it was, right? This prophecy that this Darksaber would unite the clans, which it did, right?
Right.
And, it's as simple as we have a lot of different clans and we want them to be united, and just leave it at that, right? We don't get into any of the politics or any of that stuff, because I think for most audiences, that might be enough, only because it's a trope that we've seen time and time again. We've seen it in Lord of the Rings with uniting all the human factions. More recently, we see it with like Avatar. He's going around and getting all the different avatars from the different, there's the fire ones and the water ones and the earth, right? And they're going to bring them all together at some point. So I think that would probably be enough. I do like, though, that when you have somebody like Jon Favreau and somebody like Dave Filoni that's contributing, they will kind of slip in some of that stuff for us, right? The diehards, the people that are up on Saturday night watching a live feed of a Star Wars YouTube show, right? I think they will give us some of that. I think there's going to be some red meat for us as well, and that'll bode well for us, because it's something for us to speak about and not ad nauseum after that.
Right. I mean, because in theory, people championing around an object of saying whoever has that object is who should lead you is dumb. I mean, it's just dumb, right? It's a symbolic thing, a symbolic weapon, symbolic thing. So there's got to be more to all of that, and so you have to get into, and I think for all the Easter eggs and all the little tidbits here and there, I think build into all of that. But I think at some point they're going to have to get past this. I would love to see the Darksaber destroyed, and they have to. And they have to,
your mouth.
And they have to find a way to actually figure out what is this unified Mandalorian culture look like? So I think that's I don't know, maybe we'll get to Razor Crest moments here later on, but.
All right. Okay. We may have to turn that into a Patreon show. You've drawn you, and who was it in here? Somebody in the chat. I'm going to call you out now.
Oh, Susan
out of
did.
love.
I didn't even see that.
It was Susan.
Yeah, maybe the Darksaber will be destroyed. Go for it.
Yeah, go ahead. Since you're on her team, go ahead, read this.
Yeah, maybe the Darksaber will be destroyed like in Lord of the Rings, like the ring in Lord of the Rings, because it brings nothing but trouble and is cursed. I mean, it brings nothing but destruction within your own ranks, right? And you see this in Lord of the Rings. It's a great example. So great job, Susan. Where you see best friends, brothers torn apart because of the power of this one ring, and just the corruption that it brings with it, and just the vying for it. And you could just visually, mentally, picture people climbing over one another trying to get this weapon just so they can lead, even though they have no idea how to lead or what they're trying to lead. They just want power. And I think that's the thing, like ultimate power corrupts, right? And so anytime you have this object, while it's an important object, it's a very symbolic object, it is just a symbol. It is not what makes you. It is not who you are. It is just a symbolic thing. It is just, it has no importance for the most part. I mean, it's a very powerful weapon, make no mistake. It has a cultural importance and things like that, but it does not make or break who you are as a people.
Yeah. I mean, I think at one point it may have had significance, right? Because it was used to combat the Jedi, right? Kind of equal the odds. I mean, they already had that with their armor and the Beskar and everything that they've done, right? Projectiles, ballistic weapons, fire. I mean, they found ways. And I think it was Alex here. He said someone quickly compare and contrast Jedi with their lightsabers versus Mandalorians with their weapons and armor. We actually did a show similar to this when we talked about the Mandalorian weapons and armor. You'll have to go back and listen to it or watch it. But essentially, everything that they have today was a result of being at war for 1,000 years with the Jedi, right? Or it wasn't that long, but for a number of years, they've always been at odds with it. When they're not fighting themselves, they're fighting someone else. And that other someone else is usually the Jedi, because they have oddly, they have very similar viewpoints. If you think about it, there's a whole show that we could do on that.
Well, the Darksaber is the inverse of a lightsaber, right? I mean, it's just it's that counterculture, between the two clans, like you said, fueling that 1,000 years of war between the two parties.
So just quickly on this, and we'll kind of move into the next part. I don't hate the idea of the Darksaber being destroyed, but I think it would be more powerful. Maybe not. That's not the right word. I think they could still tell a really deep, significant, substantial story in Din Djarin saying exactly what you just said. This is just an item, right? It doesn't mean anything. It did at some point, and whoever holds this, so be it. They can be the leader, but that's not really what leadership is about, right? They shouldn't be putting their faith in these idols, these false idols, if you will. I think they could do that and still keep the Darksaber around. That way, people like us that bought it still have something. and they can still sell millions of these things at
They're
the
still
parks.
holding on.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. They're gonna market this thing. I'm sure they already have versions of it out there. But at some point, we're gonna get a very realistic looking Darksaber with the sounds and everything else. And so I don't know. From a purely capitalist perspective, I don't think they're gonna do that. But your point's well taken. Like, I can see where this has caused a lot of problems over the years. Well, hold on. We assume it has, right? From a canon perspective, we really don't know. We just know that it was used at one point to unite the clans. It disappeared from the Jedi took it back. The Mandalorians took it back from them. Then it disappeared for I don't know how long until Darth Maul finds it on Malachor, right? And then it just shows up. And yeah, okay, it's been kind of a problem since. I'll give you that, especially right now. But I don't know. We'll have to find out. Maybe they will get into some of that. And maybe it has been a cursed item for thousands of years, and we just are unaware of that. So, okay, well, let's talk about. I want to talk quickly about the Purge and the Night of 1,000 Tears. Do you think we got enough from the Book of Boba Fett? And it's a very small scene, like 30 seconds long, if that, right, that we got. Do you think that was enough, or do you think we're going to get even more? Are they going to give us more of an expose on exactly what happened? Or here's the other question: if you don't, would it be more powerful for them to kind of show us, without showing us exactly when it happened, but showing us the end result of that as we're traversing and moving through Mandalore or Mandalore, Concordia, wherever the impact has been, and seeing the results of the Empire? Do you think that's more powerful, or do you want to see the death and destruction in greater detail?
Let me ask you a different question. Which one what do you think is more important?
All that lead up, and then let me ask you a different question.
Well, no, because I think this is
all right,
answering a question by asking another question.
Okay, I'm fair.
So, do we need to see all of the background with Grogu and how he was rescued from the Jedi Temple, or is the Night of 1,000 Tears and what the Empire did on Mandalore more as important or more important? Like, if you talk about the two, which one do you need to see more of in order for the story?
Okay, I think because they'll be on Mandalore, we don't need to see any more of that. Like, to my point, like, I think we're going to see the death, destruction. We'll see the end result, how people have been living, what this has done to them. That's probably enough, and kind of leave it to our imagination. But with something like Grogu, I think that we have to see. I think we are going to see that. We'll talk about that here later.
Within the context of the season, though, which one means more? Mandalore, to me, I think Mandalore has to mean a lot more. It's important to understand where Grogu came from, how he got out. We're interested in it. I'm not saying that's not something we don't want to see. But I think from what is it we need to see, or what do we need to understand more? Maybe not see. I think to maybe get to more direct on your question. Yeah, maybe we don't need to see it, but we do need to understand this better about what precipitated the attack, how deep was the attack, what did it do? Like, we are going to see visual elements because they are going to Mandalore. We are going to get all of this stuff. I think that is more important than Grogu's rescue from the temple, because I just don't know that it has any relevance to this story arc. I mean, for the most part, it's important for Grogu's character, but it's not important for all of these other characters and what we're going to go through for 8 chapters here.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. I think if they had not shown us the Jedi, which I have, my theory was that it's either that or they're going way back in time when the Jedi, those are the Mandalorians coming through to steal back the Darksaber, right? That's another theory. I think it's probably Grogu. I think we're going to see Grogu and all that.
We're unlocking Grogu's memories, right? That dark time in his memory that Luke talked about.
You're right. That is purely character development. Yes, we all want, even if it wasn't, the idea of going back to Order 66 and just seeing how that transpired, that's pretty exciting stuff, even if it doesn't play into the larger narrative of what's going on Mandalore. But because, like I said, I guess what I'm saying is, I think you're right. Your point's well taken, and you're right that having flashbacks of what happened during the Purge and Night of 1,000 Tears is probably more substantial, more important to the narrative of this season. But because we're going to be on Mandalore and we're going to see all of that, and it's going to be done through narrative, it's going to be done through the visuals, right? Then it makes the Grogu stuff like, well, it's going to happen, right? We're going to have the best of both worlds, I guess, to some extent in that way, or at least our cake and eat it too.
I think the one interesting aspect of it is, will we see this event through the eyes of the different clans? Is there a different story, a different perspective that might be shared, that might be interesting to know? I don't know if that's necessary, I don't think it's probably necessary at a very deep level, but understanding what it meant to each of those clans, or at least the ones that maybe we get introduced to in any kind of level of detail, I think might be important to know, especially if they differ in some significant way, or even if they differ just in a very delicate way that just changes their perspective of how they view the other Mandalorians. Maybe some clans turned tail on them and they feel like they were abandoned.
Well,
I mean, we hear this already, right? That you abandoned us. Where was your clan when we needed you most, right? We hear that in the trailer from Bo-Katan herself. Your cult abandoned us, basically. We're supposed to be this people. So, I mean, there's elements of it, I think, that we will continue to have, sprinkled throughout that I think will be important overall from the overall narrative as well.
Well, that brings up something I want to talk a little bit later, but let's just quickly touch on it. In war, there are people that profit from it, right? And in Star Wars Rebels and Clone Wars, actually, it was actually both, but we got to see there were certain factions of Mandalorians that profited from the war. They sided with the Empire, right? We're talking about like Gar Saxon, his whole group. We can talk about the folks that kind of fell in line with Darth Maul. What were they called? They were the Children of the Watch, weren't they?
Yeah, it's Death Watch. Yeah,
Death Watch. That's what it was. Thank you. But Death Watch, right? So there have been groups that have kind of sided with the bad guys, right? They weren't united with the other Mandalorians. They were like, screw those guys. We've been at war forever with them. Kill them. That's fine. And we'll benefit from that. But it would be interesting to see the perspective of all of these clans that were kind of ravaged by the bombing of the Empire, the incoming of the Empire. But then who were the ones that maybe profited, right? Or who maybe still be on Mandalore themselves? I mean, my theory is that I think the Empire set up shop there. Like, I think they're well entrenched. They've been there for a long time. They probably have big operational bases. Maybe this is where Moff Gideon's headquarters are. Maybe this is where Thrawn is coming in, right? It sounds like they have this place. And we know from Din Djarin that this, what does he call it? This place is I can't remember what the word he used now in season 1
tomb
or season 2.
Yeah.
What do you say?
I think he called it a tomb or something like that.
Yeah, something. Well, either way, there's no reason to go back there, I think is what he was telling Bo-Katan, right? So that leads us to think either it's completely demolished or it's not a place for that Mandalorians are welcome. My theory is that the Empire is set up there. There may be groups or tribes, clans of Mandalorians who sided with the Empire, and now they're kind of like established themselves as, the ruling clans or the ruling group aside from the Empire as well. But seeing that perspective, to go back to what you're saying, seeing that perspective of not only the people that were bombarded, but then the people that may have churned and joined them, and what did they get from that? What were they promised? What were they given for siding with the Empire at that time? Would be an interesting juxtaposition between the two different groups. So
I'm with you though. I think the Empire's probably there. They've set up shop and they've got something that they don't want people to know about. Yeah.
Well, here I've got another question here that kind of segues. This is a little bit later, but I'm going to pull it in now. Who is like on Mandalore itself? Like, what is apart from him bringing the clans together? What would the purpose be? Like, what aside from unification, which I think is fine. I mean, I don't know that there needs to be anything more. But I was trying to think, like, why would they, if they're all going to unite and go to war, which I would expect them to do, there's got to be an opposing force of some sort. And that opposing force is likely going to have to be other Mandalorians who have decided that they're the rightful rulers for whatever reason, or it's the Empire, which would be the natural group that I would think would be there, right? Or some combination thereof. But is there any other kind of, I don't know, any other thoughts, theories as to what could be like the big bad or the big objective outside of unification of the Mandalorian clans?
I think the big unknown is like, what does Moff Gideon really want with Grogu? I mean, that's the other part of it. We know that Moff Gideon has a bit of an obsession with Mandalorians in some way. What is the importance of the Darksaber to him as well? And then what is he truly doing with Grogu? Is this all in service of the Emperor? In kind of that roundabout way, is this about the rise of the First Order eventually, like we hear from Carson Teva? I mean, there's a lot of hanging chads, a lot of carrots being dangled in front of us about which one of these paths has something that is what is the primary concern. Because I'm with you, there has to be some sort of, if you're going to unite, I mean, yeah, it's great to have the family back together and to feel like you can rebuild, and maybe that's all it is. And I'm with you. I think if that's what it is, I think that's okay. That can still work, and that can work really well. But it's still, why don't we hear Mandalorians talked about, 15 years from now when it comes to the sequel trilogy? And so is it another civil war between the Mandalorians? I mean, visually that would be amazing. right? Mandalorian on Mandalorian. It was great to see in Clone Wars. It'd be great to see again. Do we need to keep revisiting that? Well, probably not. But I would like to see it. So I have a feeling it's probably the Empire or whatever iteration, whatever the Empire is trying to rekindle or trying to reestablish. That may not be First Order specifically, but something intermediary, with Moff Gideon. So I continue to think it's something about Moff Gideon. I just don't know what quite yet because there's just not enough information for us to really grab that and get that information yet. But I'm with you. There's got to be some. Who's the antagonist here? And right now, it just seems like it's internal fighting at this point.
Right.
And that'll be okay for a while, but that'll get tiresome if we don't iron that out, like within half the season or something like that.
Yeah, right. I'm with you there. Okay, well, let's get to the reason why everybody's here now that we've got into hour 2, and that's to talk about all the characters. So I'm going to start from the ground up, if you will, kind of starting with the minor characters, and we'll work our way up to, Babu Freak. No, I'm kidding. I'm
going to ask you this first question, though, because I have no idea. All right, who are Christopher Lloyd and Tim Meadows going to play?
I don't know. Next question, please.
Okay, well,
So Christopher, So I think we talked about Christopher Lloyd when he was announced officially. I don't know. It felt like last year at some point now.
It's been a while, yeah.
It's been a while. And we said that he's always, I don't want to say stereotype or cast typed, but he's always been one of these like kooky, eccentric kind of characters.
Have you heard him talk?
Where that fits into, like Doc, yeah. Where that fits into the Mandalore society and culture, I don't think it does. We've got the Babu Fricks there, so maybe he's kind of, with that group in some way.
Maybe let's back up. Do you think we see Christopher Lloyd's face, or do you think it's more of a voice behind, a CGI type of character or a droid or something like that, or do we see his face?
He's such a physical actor. It would be a shame if we didn't get to see his body in his face, right? And just that the physicality that he has with his comedy. Right. So I'm leaning towards seeing him in person. Maybe he has prosthetics on and makeup and all kinds of other stuff, and it's maybe not recognizable. But I think that he brings something physically to a role that would be kind of short. I would feel shortchanged if it was just a voice or something like a Nick Nolte.
Yeah, Nick Nolte was such a great example too, because we were like, man, we're going to see Nick Nolte on screen. God, I hope not. That's disturbing.
Yeah. Well,
Christopher Lloyd, a much older actor too, right? So some of it is you don't know exactly without having any idea what role they're going to play, you don't really know how they fit in best. But I'm with you. He is a very physical actor. The way that he's always brought characters to life with more than just, his voice and everything is very iconic anyway, with the dynamic inflections and the things that he seems to be able to do. But it's also like the motions and it's like the guy that played Kramer on Seinfeld, very much the same way, right? Michael Richards. Right. Is just a very physical comedic actor in those types of ways. So I'd really like to see some of that come across. Even if he's more of a CGI character, I would like to see those emulated. So it does feel like we got the spirit of Christopher Lloyd, even if it's dialed way back, so it's not overwhelming. That would be really cool to see something like that. I'd love to have him part of the Mandalorians. I think that would be really pretty epic, but my expectations are pretty modest in that regard.
Yeah. Maybe they introduced like some kind of, elder person at one of the clans, right? He's been around. He used to be a Mandalorian, and now he's just kind of like the elder tribe leader or something. And
he's Gar Saxon.
No, not Gar. Gar Saxon's dead.
Or is he?
He's dead. But yeah, so in both of those characters, they've got a history of being funny people. So I would expect both of them to bring levity to the show, and probably we're going to need it given some of the dark material we're about to get into with what happened on Mandalore. But Tim Meadows, both of these roles feel like they're going to be very, very minor. Like we're not getting any big. Unless Christopher Lloyd comes in as Master Sabayoth. So,
Dale had an idea in the chat too. I'd love to see Christopher Lloyd play the wise old Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Someone that provides that counterpoint to the armorer would be interesting. And you talk about someone who would have gravitas and weight and like actually be a very strong counterbalance to a character like the armorer, who is very strong and, few words, but also just every word she says just seems to hit like one of her hammers. Christopher Lloyd, a character like that would definitely, provide a nice counterpoint.
Yeah. Well, I think there will be minor roles. Horatio Sands, from season 1 of The Mandalorian, he had a lot of makeup on, and he's known for physical comedy, but he didn't have a very big role.
Big enough to come back for season 2.
He came back in season 2, so who knows? But I don't expect either one to be in big roles. What about any surprise cameos? Okay, so I've got a list here.
Yeah.
And we don't need to, if you want to elaborate on them, feel free to do so. Otherwise, you can give me a yes or no on whether or not we're going to see them. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start with Cobb Vanth.
A definite maybe, because we know at the end of Book of Boba Fett, he's in the chamber, right? He's in the Bacta tank.
Mm-hmm.
So where does Cobb Vanth stay? Is that being saved for a potential season 2 of Book of Boba Fett, which of course there's a lot more rumors about these days? Or is he coming here? So I think that one's he's like a 50-50 for me. And again, it goes back to also characters that owe a favor to Mandalorian, which is a fairly long list at this point, right?
Yes.
And so he's one of them, and he's kind of paid his debt in ways, but they have a bit of a relationship there. So I think Cobb Vanth's a definite maybe in this one.
Okay, I'm with you. Like I would like to see him in here. How we get him there, I don't know, unless it's like Mando's like, wow, we need everybody, and I'm going to start calling in favors. And this is back from season 2 that I had this kind of headcanon theory that at some point Mando was going to make the call and say, look, you're a Mandalorian. Don't care what anybody else says. You have the armor. You lived like a Mandalorian. I need you with the other Mandalorians on Mandalore. Get over here. Right. And he gets to be part of that. Right. Apart from that, I don't know that he's going to have a role any more than that, because I think he's got primary duties back on, was it Tatooine? What was the name of the new town?
Oh, yeah.
Freetown. Yep. Well, I think he's got his responsibilities there.
Primary goal is not dying at this point.
Yeah, right.
All right, so let's go to the next obvious character. If we talk about Cobb Vanth, what about Boba Fett then? And Finnick, I guess we'll throw Finnick Shand in there with her.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't mention either one. But yeah, I would say, again, for me, they're probably 50-50, but for the same reasons, right? Calling in favors, let's get everybody that we have, and because this is a big war coming. We need all hands on deck kind of thing. But beyond that, I don't know. Now, that would be a very interesting
I think
injection.
Boba Fett, the conversation when he had with the Night Owls, when he's first introduced to them, I think that there alone, like that weirdness between them and some of the dialogue between them, I think that would be really cool for him to come back around and not associating with Mandalorians and his dad being viewed as a bit of an outcast, I guess. You know, what does that actually, how does he want to reconnect with the Mandalorian culture, if at all? This would be the opportunity to do it. So I think this is one that might actually be a little more interesting than at first glance that we might think. But, and again, it's a dangerous thing to do though, because of all of the kind of backlash, I guess, with the Mandalorian upsetting the Book of Boba Fett's overall, story driven narrative or whatever you want to call it, even though they were kind of the stronger episodes. So, would it, and maybe this is Boba Fett's chance for upending Mandalorian on his own show. Right. It's becoming a Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman type like a love story here.
Yeah, the dynamic of inserting somebody like Boba Fett, given his history and background, amongst other quote true Mandalorians, right? People from Mandalore, that would be a very interesting dynamic. I would really like to see that. So I mean, we'll see. He's got there's rumors now that season 2 is starting to film, or going to start filming here later this year for Book of Boba Fett 2. So he's probably got his other duties. So I would say cameo at best, but I can see him, answering the bat signal if it was thrown up.
Right.
All right, Luke.
No.
Luke Skywalker. Any takers?
No.
I don't think so. Thrawn. Just pulling the Band-Aid off here. Thrawn, what do you got?
Oh man, Thrawn. If Thrawn is, I think it's like the Book of Boba Fett cameo, or the trailer, not the trailer, the teaser at the end, the post-credit scene, kind of like what we got at the end of season 2 for Book of Boba Fett. Mm-hmm. So if we see Thrawn specifically, or anything that even suggests him like in person visually, I think it'd be a post-credit, but I think that's still pretty low. But I think that one's a real possibility to really tease Ahsoka.
So I think this one has to happen at some point. I don't know that it has to happen in season 3 of The Mandalorian, but to your point, I was thinking the same thing. Post-credit scene, set the stage. This is the Thanos, if you will, of that first, the MCU, right? They kind of teased him that he was coming. He was the big bad. Everything was all roads lead to him at some point. I think that would make sense. And it certainly falls in line with the formula. So I'd like to see a post-credit scene with Thrawn. Maybe it's just a hologram. Maybe it's Moff Gideon finally making contact with him or something, but just something to establish that there is somebody larger than, and we finally get to see him because he's already been named, right? We saw him named in season 2.
Right.
So finally getting to see him in some way, I think makes sense because he is. He's going to be everything's going to lead up to that at some point, but more on that a little bit later.
Okay, what about Sabine Wren?
I think it'd be a misstep if they didn't.
She's so involved with the story. I think that she has to be almost.
Yeah. And plus it sets the stage for Ahsoka, right? Yeah. There's going to be some kind of a send off there or some kind of a natural organic transition. And it doesn't have to be a big scene. Again, it could just be something where Ahsoka's there. And because same thing with Ahsoka, I'll just kind of throw her in there because she's next on this list. But I would say they're probably together. I can't see Sabine Wren coming in on her own and being part of that. And later on, Ahsoka comes. I think they show up. They're a pair. They're a duo. And they say, hey, good luck. We've got our own mission to do, but we're, call us if you need us. And they head out, right? I can see that happening. And I would put it at pretty high odds. Probably towards the end, though. No, I wouldn't say anything up front.
Yeah, I agree. I think Sabine and both the scene, Sabine and Ahsoka probably make a cameo here.
What about Christopher Lloyd as Fen Rao?
Yeah, this is one that keeps surfacing of characters.
Well, I keep bringing that up.
I know. Yeah, we've talked about this in the past. I think when Christopher Lloyd was first announced, I think this is a name that we tossed out too. And I mean, it's possible. I mean, with Fen Rao, I don't know that Christopher Lloyd really fits that that character very well from what we saw on screen, but I guess it's possible. But I think Fen Rao to show up would be pretty amazing. But I got to be honest, it's almost like that name has been lost to time now. Now, nothing is lost to time with Dave Filoni. So I'll put this one, though. I'd put this one about, I don't know, I'll put like 70% on this one, 75%. I think it just makes sense within the narrative. So it's like a why not? Let's throw all the Mandalorian names out there that we know that are still alive. Because again, why not? And again, if you're looking for that counterpoint, like we talked about with Christopher Lloyd, but that character is really what we're talking about. So if Fen Rao, compared with the Armorer, again, has some interesting dynamics that you could probably pitch there.
Yeah. And for anybody that doesn't know, I guess the short one-liner elevator pitch on Fen Rao was he is a Mandalorian. He was in the Clone Wars, was he not?
Yes. So
he was in a couple episodes there. He was kind of against the good guys, if you will, because he was a Mandalorian. When we get to Rebels, he comes back. He's actually against them there as well at first, and then he switches sides after he realizes that things aren't going the way they should be. Again, oversimplifying here, but he ends up joining the Rebels. So he sides with Sabine Wren. Kanan Jarrus has a really good moment where they sit down and he tells Fen Rao, "Thank you for what you did. You saved me and my master, years ago during the Clone Wars." And he just becomes kind of like this elder, right? This kind of like elder that has a lot of wisdom, has been in a lot of wars, seen a lot of things, but has a pretty good head on his shoulders in terms of what's right and what's wrong.
Right. Very
beloved character, I would say, at least from Rebels fans. So I would like to see him come back. And this, even though most people would scratch their heads, this would be an opportunity for, somebody like Jon Favreau to kind of give him the limelight, make him kind of an established character, very similar to, the Cobb Vanth or, pick any number of characters that have been in other source materials that have been brought to live action now that we just kind of talk about without, really second guessing ourselves.
So we know Palomado is going to be in this season. Is her boyfriend the Major Domo there as well?
Her boyfriend's a Jawa. But
she has many boyfriends, Albert.
She has many Jawa boyfriends. I would say no. I hope he doesn't. I kind of want him for Book of Boba Fett. I actually don't mind him so much. Them together is really gross. But I would say if I have to see him, I'd rather see him in the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah,
I'm not going to belabor that anymore.
I think, the tone of that show worked a little bit better for that dynamic.
All right. So what about the Skeleton Crew?
I'm going to go with no. Because we don't know who the Skeleton Crew really is.
Right, we have no idea who they are.
So even if we see them, will we know that that's who they are? I don't know, unless it was Jude Law. But again, I don't know why they would show up, how that would fit. So I'll just go with this. I'll go with like a 1% chance here.
So I put him in here because Favreau last week was talking about how they were thinking ahead, right? They were thinking ahead about how this series, Ahsoka, Skeleton Crew, they all exist in that same timeline. Right. And that as they're building the story, right? He in context, he was talking about he's already written season 4. Like it's done. It's in the can. Okay. And they're now rumored to go film in October of this year. So as soon as they're done here, they're rolling into filming. Okay. But in the context, he was talking about how they were having to map out how all these characters or all these plots kind of come together. And that there would be opportunities. Now, he didn't go into a lot of detail. He didn't say there may be somebody from the skeleton crew. He just said that there are characters that they feel like they need to kind of cross-pollinate into these different universes. And so I thought, well, skeleton crew, maybe, maybe not. It's probably too early. I can see them planting somebody like an Ahsoka, right? As kind of a, here's our, springboard into skeleton crew. But, I wouldn't put it past them either.
And that's where I was more or less coming from. You have a show like Ahsoka, which you might view as more exploratory in nature because they're looking for Thrawn, they're looking for Ezra, they're searching the galaxy. That they would come across someone like the skeleton crew, to me, just makes more sense.
Yeah.
And again, when that was filming and when this was filming, they were not anywhere near each other physically, just outside of the story aspect, just physically filming a TV show. Whereas Ahsoka and Skeleton Crew were very close to where that would make more sense, to where that crossover would be available for them to, to be able to do that with how they were filming it. So
yeah,
again, not likely here, but I could see in an Ahsoka just a few months down the road. Yeah, that comes onto the table a lot more clearly, because I'm with you. They at least need to start sprinkling these other characters. Again, they want to continue connecting everything in a very MCU kind of way. So it makes sense to introduce those characters like that. Yeah. But I think within an exploratory show, which we're kind of assuming Ahsoka will be on some level, at least for a time of it, would make sense if they came across someone, much like what Mandalorian was early on.
Yeah. Yeah, probably a better fit there, I guess is another way of saying that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So let's get to the established characters, people we know that are going to be in the series. Babu Frick. What the heck's going on there? I don't have any good theories.
He's running the droid shop, baby. He loves droids.
Well, that's the thing that's so ironic, right? I mean, maybe he's on Tatooine. I don't know, with Pelimato, or I don't know
like
where
he's on Navarro.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, maybe it's Navarro. Who knows? I mean, it could be just a throwaway line of I have all these new droids because I can't hire enough people, and so I needed a good crew. And I think he's there for
he was literally putting together a new crew. Literally.
Yeah. Literally putting together. I mean, we get the shot in the trailer too of the droids, like that little droid factory.
Yeah, the droid
bar. I assume those are tied together.
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, yeah, but why is that droid bar important? It's kind of a bit of a mystery.
It was a bar. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, a bit of a mystery at this point. Yeah, it was like a little cantina for droids.
Yep. Okay, Carson Teva, we talked a little bit about him already. He mentions in the trailer that there's something, quote, dangerous happening out there. He doesn't allude to what it is. I'm going to assume that, at least in this timeline, that something dangerous is the starts of the First Order, Snoke, the experiments that are happening, right? Anything beyond that, though, I'm kind of struggling to think what else it could be.
He was saying the same things in season 2 as well for Mandalorian. And again, his character just keeps showing up and getting a little more airtime. So he clearly knew something is going on, but he's not telling us exactly what it is because he doesn't know either.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got this inkling, he's got this feeling that there's some energy happening around her that he just can't quite put on. And that was the whole idea with Cara Dune, right? And getting her to be a Ranger in the New Republic. It really felt like that was the direction that was supposed to go. Carson Teva along with Cara Dune and maybe a couple of other characters, and that was going to be this maybe big event that we were going towards. So now is repositioning with this character as he maybe being more of that lead aspect of finding this out from the New Republic aspect of things, right? So I think it's an interesting thing because we just don't know a whole lot about it, but he keeps surfacing, and he's really the only New Republic, figurehead constant that we've had in any of these shows. So, I'm liking the character more and more, even though he's just kind of officer, and they called him Blue at one point,
right? Which
was a little bit ridiculous, but I like that this character is grounded and there is something more to it. And this will give us a much better idea if something like Rangers of the New Republic is actually going to happen or not.
Yeah.
Because right now it's a huge question mark.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it died on the vine somewhere down the road.
But it does seem like there's a bigger, at least it was originally planned to have a bigger overall role in this kind of Mandoverse, but it sounds like he is still going to have one, but where is it going from here is the big question.
Yeah. I'd liken Carson Teva to somebody like Agent Coulson from the MCU, right?
Right.
He's kind of like that. He's kind of like the through point for all of the universes, which I think would be great for him as an actor to be able to kind of be that person that kind of connects them all together in some way.
Right.
I don't know if they're playing that up, but I can see where this character, because again, all of these are going to come to head at some point, right? And so someone has to kind of have that viewpoint of like, I can see everything that's going on. I can see the landscape, and I need everybody. All of you are going to have to come together. He could be that kind of, connected tissue for all those different groups.
And what's interesting about the character is that no one really likes him, right? I mean, Mando.
Well, he's the fuzz. Who likes the fuzz?
Right?
Nobody.
Yeah, but I mean, Carl Weathers or Grief Karga is buck to the system and giving him some sass, and of course, Mando has had run-ins with them both. They saved his butt, but they also were kind of jerks about it when they were killing all the spiders, and all of that. So, but there's a bit of a funny relationship between them as well as kind of developed. So you can always see where that could become something a little bit more, especially if they find that they need the New Republic's, involvement. If it is something like the First Order and they start to get these inklings of it. But again, how does that start to tread with some of the other book material that we've had in the past with like the Leia books and things like that?
Mm-hmm. So there's kind of, they've been signaling, especially in season 2, that there are some kind of experiments happening with cloning, right?
Right.
And, we've got the whole mythos of, needing the blood and the midichlorian counts. And, we all presume that is the Empire, the remnants of the Empire, or the beginnings of the First Order, however you want to look at it, or Emperor Palpatine himself in whatever state of decay he's currently in, have kind of come together, and they're trying to, again, this is theory on our part, but I think widely accepted at this point, that they are trying to clone a Force user, trying to create some kind of a host body to get the Emperor back in and still imbue him with the Force abilities, right? So they kind of laid that groundwork in season 2. We got, it's kind of a trail that started with the Rise of Skywalker, with Dr. Pershing. It was kind of really brought forth and center. We've got Nala Se as well. I mean, we can talk about her. She's out in Mount Tantus doing whatever it is they're doing out there, which I assume is probably all related. But I guess the question around Dr. Pershing is he going to be siding with the New Republic? Because he always came across as a good guy, right? I mean, even in season 1, when Mando walks in and rescues the baby, he's like, no, I was trying to protect him or whatever, and Mando doesn't kill him because you could tell that he was being honest, I guess. But do you think he's going to side with the New Republic, or do you think what we saw, and we've only seen him in the trailer, to be fair, he's kind of flying through what looks to be Coruscant. Maybe it's, Hosnian Prime, one of the major capital cities. And I can't tell if he's still, in handcuffs. Are they escorting him somewhere? But I guess the question is he going to be with the New Republic and become a good guy and help them kind of thwart whatever efforts the Empire is going through right now? Or is there a potential storyline here where Gideon gets away, and then the next step is to get their scientists back, and so they rescue him or pull him back into the mix at some point?
I equate Pershing to maybe a less severe version of the scientist that was in Andor. They're morally ambiguous. It's all about science. It's about learning what you can do, rather whether you should or shouldn't do it. The reason why he was protecting Grogu was because he was fascinating. It was something interesting. It was something very unique about it. He didn't necessarily have any attachment to Grogu, I don't believe, but there's something unique, and to study this being and to have that opportunity is once in a lifetime and once in a million, especially in this era. And so I like the idea. I'm more to like the interest level I have in Pershing, because it's a fairly one-dimensional character, from what we've learned about him and the time he's been on screen. But I am curious, though, because I still believe he's probably still in New Republic custody. Maybe he's working for them because he's just a scientist and he just does it. I don't know if he has loyalty anywhere. But they did make a point, though. They pointed him out that he is a clone, he's a clone scientist. He's a clone scientist expert, in this field. They pointed that in season 2. So, I mean, this is something that is got to be going that direction. But is he going to go rat out what the Empire was doing? That part's interesting. I don't know. We don't know the character very well. We don't really know what the New Republic is doing with him either. So I think we'll get some aspect of that. And maybe this is the Mandalorian equivalent of political intrigue on Coruscant, which appears to be Coruscant at the very least of where he's at. Maybe there's a Hosnian Prime, but it doesn't really matter, I suppose. But I do like the idea that that he's still lurking around in the shadows. It would be interesting if the Empire was trying to get him back, though, and that would that would have a different level of conflict to be introduced, because he is important. And again, those resources are somewhat limited, at least from a high level, because we don't know where Nala Se is at this point. Bad Batch to here is
span of
20 years.
20 years, right?
Yeah, so there's a lot of time has gone by. We don't know if she's alive. We don't know if she's still effective. We don't know if she's just working on something different or what that might be. We don't even really know what she was working on specifically anyway. So A lot of questions there. So I think this would be an interesting one if Gideon, I mean, because other questions like where's Gideon at, right? And whether or not Pershing is important, whether or not Pershing is important to Gideon, I think within that, with that frame of mind.
Yeah.
And because that might be something we know that Gideon was interested. This was, this is what he was working on, and Pershing was reporting to him. So,
yeah,
where does that sit now, and what does Pershing want to do? So I think that's interesting. I hope we get a little bit more drive behind Gideon or behind Pershing, but I also like the idea of this morally ambiguous character that I don't really care which side. I'm just here for the science. Even though it's perverse and sick sometimes, it's just how they operate because that's just who they are. I just find that interesting with those types of characters because they're dangerous and they just float with the wind, and you can't dislike them because they are who they are in that way. Whether they're doing something completely heinous or not, they just are who they are, and it's a different level of interest for a character, a very different, not black and white George Lucas kind of world, right? Which just makes it just a different shakeup.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes back to my comment about it. They are the true neutral characters in Dungeons and Dragons, right? You know where the lawful good people are going to stand.
They are the chaotic.
You know where
neutral.
the chaotic evil are.
Yeah.
But those neutral guys, don't trust them. You can't trust them. They can float anyway, and they're okay with it. So here's where I'm getting hung up on this is, like I said at the very beginning, we're going straight into assuming we're going to spend some time, ramping up. But it feels like we're going to spend a lot of time on Mandalore. So where does this fit in? Where is this Pershing the midichlorians and the baby and Gideon's efforts, all that? How does that play into all of this, right? Either we're going to get, 4 or 5 episodes that are super heavy on the Mandalore stuff, and there's 3 episodes that are more focused on that, or we're going to get these kind of competing storylines running in parallel, and we're going to be jumping back and forth, right, to them. Pershing's the most interesting character in all this because I just don't, for the life of me, know where his loyalties are. I think I understand what you're saying, where they're just kind of a neutral character. They're more about the science. They don't really have one. They don't, side one way or the other. I think I would like to see him have a heart and be more of like, I used to be that way. Or, I know it sounds cliche.
You always want the best of people.
Yeah,
so it's key.
Well, yeah, that's what we do so well here. But I want to see the best of people, right? So I think I would like to see that story. But what's his value to the New Republic? Like, he's going to tell them everything he knows, and then what? I don't see the Empire, I don't see the New Republic saying, well, let's put him to use and let's see if he can make some clones for ourselves. It doesn't sound morally, it sounds like it's very immoral for somebody like the New Republic to do. So that means like his storyline is over unless they go repurpose him somewhere else. And it gets messy really fast if he's siding with the Republic. What's more interesting is him being, still in cuffs, and Gideon saying, look, I need you because you are my lead scientist. You are the only person that we have right now that can harvest the midichlorians, right? And infuse the patient or infuse the body or whatever else. And so without him, the body of Palpatine never happens. And if that's the case, then he has to go back, right? I'm assuming a lot here, right? But that could be one path in terms of why they have to preserve him, why he continues to stay a part of the storyline, because eventually he goes on to get a successful clone for Palpatine to come back.
And it's entirely plausible that Pershing has no idea what he was actually working on from the end game perspective. And from a New Republic aspect, they might just think, the Empire wants to build another clone army like they did before, because it fell apart. It did really well. Then they made these mistakes of taking it apart. Now look what they're left with. It's this mess, and they can't hit the broadside of a barn. So, but that Pershing may not know what his end game is, that he's working towards the Emperor, might be completely oblivious to him. And again, he's so absorbed in just the work that he doesn't even ask the questions. It doesn't matter.
Right.
I've been given this task, and I can't seem to crack the code, but we're trying. But yeah, and I'm with you. And I would almost think that and I guess the question maybe I have for you before we move on, just so we don't belabor this too much more longer, but should we start here with the first episode? Should we start with a Pershing and start to move that forward and figure out what this galactic narrative looks like, before we dive into the more of the specifics of the Mandalorian narrative?
Maybe. Like I said, 35 minutes doesn't give you a lot of time to do that. But maybe that 35 minutes is really both. And
I can't imagine we spend a ton of time with Pershing in general anyway, right?
Exactly.
He's not the primary focus. You and I are
exactly
on the outliers here of how much people are probably interested in this character. But
Right.
but I kind of thought about this as you were talking. I was like, man, what if we just rip this Band-Aid off now? We just get this going, and then he ends up somewhere as we
Yeah.
go throughout the series, and we get this part out of the way.
I mean, maybe the core, maybe you're right. So maybe the core of what's happening in this, maybe there's 5 episodes dedicated to what's happening on Mandalore. I mean, maybe that's too much, but I can see where it sits in the middle and its bookend by setting up this stuff and then kind of closing this stuff up at the very end. Because that is still part of that larger Thrawn, the remnants of the Empire. All that seems to have to, it's going to have to exist for this series and other series to continue. Not so much Mandalore. Because I think for Mandalore, once they have somebody established, they have a long road ahead of them to rebuild, right? And that would give them, I'm not saying they're retconning, but that would certainly explain why they're not as prevalent in a lot of what we know to be canon, in the New Republic era. They've got their own stuff. They've got their own demons to work out. They're in better position. The Empire's gone. They got a long road ahead of them. They got a lot of work to do. And so they can't be fighting galactic battles. And they don't even have that precedence. They are not the world police. They've never been that. They've always stuck to Mandalore. They've always stuck to their own inner fighting, that kind of thing. So it's not uncharacteristic of them to not be around when these larger galactic wars are happening, so long as it doesn't impede on their own planet, right? So, all right. That was way more than what I thought we were going to talk about with Pershing.
All right, so let's get to some of the core characters here. So what do you think about Paz Vizsla and the armor? When we last saw them, they're just a party of 2. This was in Book of Boba Fett. They turned their back on Din Djarin. They called it an apostate. They've kicked him out. You've removed your helmet. Things are not great. Where do we find them? Like, where are we going to pick them up in all of this story? What's their role?
Yeah, I think so. They're a good reminder of where Mando comes from. I don't know that we're going to see them. I think we'll see them earlier on than we will at any point during. I can't see them being part of what's happening on Mandalore. Like, I think they may be going around trying to find their folks. I think at some point they do get there. And I think more than anything, I want to see the Armorer have some kind of discussion with like Bo-Katan on what's right, what's wrong, talking about the old ways versus the new ways. I mean, that's fascinating stuff to me to kind of hear their different viewpoints. And somebody like Din Djarin, who I would say is probably starting to shift towards the middle, right? I think at some point he is going to kind of land in the middle and say, look, a lot of this is kind of silly. We're really all talking about the same things here. I mean, he even says it at the beginning in the open, like, what are we? What do we stand for? What do we fight for? That's really what it's about. It's not about all this, the dogmatic stuff of the different viewpoints and what it means to be a Mandalore or Mandalorian.
But do you think the armor is capable of coming around to that type of thinking, though?
So it's a huge jump. I would agree. Like, mentally, the gymnastics are like astounding, right? To get there.
Maybe
but I don't know. I mean,
a little, but I've heard it just seems like a hard no almost.
It does feel like a hard no. How powerful would it be, though, if, let's say, we get to the very end?
You just want to see Emily Swallow's face.
This is where I'm going. Yeah. Okay, this is where it's selfish, but I'm going to go here. No, but she's a very beautiful woman. No, think about it. Like, and I don't want to get too cheesy here, right? But at the very end, I don't think Mando is going to wear this helmet anymore. Like, I feel like this is at some point, because of what happened in season 2, by the end of the series, at the end of the season, I should say, I think the helmet's, he's going to be taking it off just like the Bo-Katans are. But how powerful would it be to have kind of like this one last establishing shot, or maybe towards it doesn't have to be the very end, but some point at the very end when everything's kind of gotten better, they've coalesced, the Empire is gone, they're all in agreement that this is the way to go. She takes her helmet off after everybody else does. Everybody starts taking their helmets off, and she is the last one reluctantly, but it's kind of her way of signaling that she's accepted that, okay, he's right. This is the way, this is the new way. This is the way this is really what it means to be a Mandalore. It's not about a Mandalorian. It's not about where you came from, whether you were born there, whether you were brought in, whether you wear your helmet or not. It's really about a group of people that are, dedicated and fight for this planet, which is really what it's always been about for the Mandalorians. It's always been about the planet itself, not so much, all the other stuff.
I would like for all that to be true. I really would.
Here, I give you the optimistic view, and now here comes the reality. Go on.
Well, unfortunately, with the Mandalorians, there's always a bit of self-interest and their own egos get in the way, a lot of it. right? I mean, this is kind of why they're in this position to begin with. I think even when you look back to Legends, a lot of this existed. They would come together for the greater good, but for the most part, they still were very siloed, very localized way of thinking, And so I don't know that goes away. Even if you bring them all together, I just don't know if it goes away or not. And of all the characters, I think she and Paz, I think Paz could probably go. I think he might be one to go over there and take the helmet off and find that way of thinking. And if she did, I just don't know if she would be totally committed to it. It might be in the moment, but I'm wondering if she would actually, totally go through with it as a way of just a completely different way of life. Yeah. I like the idea and it makes sense, everything you're laying out. And that's a very real scenario I think that the show could go. But man, I just wonder because at their core, Mandalorians have a lot of ego. Yeah. In both the good and the negative way. I mean, ego's not a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing. And so just really curious. And they've really, put them in this position of just being completely stalwart, just stuck in where they're at and the way they think. And for them to come around would be powerful. But what does that actually mean? I mean, it would show all the other clans that, hey, if they can bridge that gap, then really anybody can.
Yeah.
But again, I think some of it's going to be what the power in is. What is it going to be to actually bridge that and to make that moment happen? And so that's the part that's difficult to say because we just don't know what it's going to be quite yet. And I'm sorry, it's not going to be Din Djarin, to the armor because she's already been like, yeah, you're something special, but you're not that special, basically to where I won't kick you out and just not forgive you. So, but anyway, it's just kind of an interesting debate there about what they will do. How far will they actually come to their overall thing, or will they just completely abandon it? They just be like, no, we're cool being on the outside. Y'all good luck. And we'll still just do things the old way. And we'll just kind of be written out the show.
We're kind of we've been down this path for now 2 seasons where we've been talking about how he's going to get everybody to come around. But I think there's another outcome where somebody like Din Djarin says, okay, let's just assume he's the leader now. He's united the clans, okay? However he gets there. But he says, look, you go practice however you feel comfortable practicing. You want to take your helmet off? Take it off. You want to leave it on? You can leave it on too. What's important though is that we stay together, and you, armorer, I need you because I don't have anybody else that knows how to use the forge, right, to make this armor. And we've got a lot of armor to build, and we've got a lot of things to do. And so, her feeling like she has now a family, she has a clan, she has a purpose again. Because, I mean, let's say they don't find anybody else, and it really has just been decimated to those 2 people that are left. I can see where maybe that's what's enough to bring her around. Where, okay, I can still wear my helmet, I can still follow my ways, but I need to accept that these other people are not wrong any more than I am in terms of my beliefs, and I'm going to serve Mandalore in a greater good, in a much bigger capacity by being here for them when they need the most to make all of this armor, make sigils, and do whatever she is. But that would be kind of a cool role for her to have.
So would it be more powerful if it was a Bo-Katan to make that connection with her though? With the armor, I'm saying, where Bo-Katan actually puts her ego aside, helmet in hand, maybe helmet on her head. I don't know what's more effective at this point, but to actually say, here's the olive branch, and to say, I need your help. We need your help collectively. We do need to do this. I'm with you though. I think some of it is, hey, you do what you want to do, but when we make the call, and this is what it was in Legends, right? When we make the call, you show up.
Yeah, everybody shows up.
It's never a question. You drop what you're doing, your missions, you end them, and you make the call back home, because that's what Mandalorians do. They take care of their own, even though then they respect their differences. They don't have to like each other, but they always fight in the common way. This is the way, and that was what season 1 taught us early on, right? Where they can not like each other, like with Paz and Din Djarin, but they will do the right thing and they will respect one another, at least in the moment of what they need to do to accomplish whatever it is they're doing, including making sacrifices in order to do it. And so I think to me, I'm thinking it's Din Djarin. I think we want it to be Din Djarin, but it doesn't make more sense for it to be a Bo-Katan where there's all of this bad blood and this history behind it all. And somehow they're the ones who have to they're the ones who have to make the sacrifices and the changes in order to make progress at the end of the day, right? So, I mean, Din Djarin could probably guilt them all into it. I mean, lead by example and everything. I mean, so there's a lot of different ways you could do it, I think is probably what we're saying. Yeah. But, which character has which character does it make it more powerful, I think, and interesting, as we'll have to find out.
Well, hold that thought, because we're going to get to, at some point, we're going to talk about who's going to be the leader at the very end of all of this. Okay, so Cara Dune, we don't need to talk a lot about here, but I mean, how are they, do you think they're going to touch this? Do you think they're going to do any kind of an explanation, or is it going to simply be Grief Karga, Din Djarin saying, where's Cara? Oh, she went off to go be somewhere else and she's living her best life, and that's it. And we don't ever see her again. Because honestly, the way the story's going, because Rangers of the New Republic has just kind of been, died on the vine, or it's now become something else. I don't see, I was really struggling to find, what's her significance at this point? And I don't think she has one outside of being part of the original team. But if they write her off as having gone off and done something else, and I think we're done. I don't think they need to do anything more than that, honestly. Or do they even mention her name?
Yeah, I kind of think they just don't mention her at all. Now, if they want to, though, for continuity, then I think where you were going is right. So she accepted the badge. Right. So she had the stripes, the stripes mean something. She said this in season 2 when they were trying to break Mayfeld out and that type of thing. And she wears it. It's a buckle, effectively like a belt buckle. So that she would have no longer been in service of Navarro, with grief and moved on would make total sense narratively. And they could make a comment to that respect if they want to at least address continuity of why she's all of a sudden no longer there. But I think in general, they don't have to mention the character at all if they don't want to. And so I think it can go either way. It would be nice to have some sort of idea of where she went, just narratively, so it doesn't feel like we just completely ignore her character rather than the actress that, whether you agree or not, that it was the actress type of thing rather than a character moment. So address the character's, position in all of this.
Yeah.
And give us closure in that regard, I think would be fine. And I think we can do without a whole lot of pomp and circumstance, and we don't have to get into a lot of specifics or anything else about it. It could just be a couple, a sentence or 2 sentences, and it's done. But,
I think they will. I think they'll just kind of briefly mention that she's now doing stuff at the New Republic, and good for her. And we move on, because she doesn't have a role in this. And, call it serendipitous or whatever you want to do. But the fact that she was already on the path, Cara Dune's character was already on the path to go do her own thing. I mean, it just kind of set up everything nicely. So they don't have to go in there. They don't have to belabor it. They don't have to do anything more than just that. And they don't even have to do that. I mean, I think that would be a service to the canon, like you said, maybe a service to the character itself, right? Because she was a major part of the first 2 seasons. So why not? But beyond that, I just can't see them doing anything more.
Hey, let me go back to a cameo question real quick, because we didn't ask this question. Is Omera going to make a cameo this season?
No.
Okay. Just want to make sure that
she'll be in the season finale when we get the fast forward to 20 years after as a post-credit scene, and they're sitting there and they've got grandchildren, and baby Grogu is teaching them how to use the Force, and they're living on the prairie kind of thing.
They're all hammering their own helmets with grandma armor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. In the rocking chairs.
All right. Grief Karga. What's going to be what's his role and impact this year?
This is another one that I'm struggling with. I love the characters, but I just don't see, at least for this season, I don't see the significance of their role apart from being a common face, somebody to refuel with, and say hello or whatever. I mean, there was in that small clip that we got, Grief Karga is trying to get Mando to come live with him on Navarro, right? He's like, oh, I'll set you up over here. You'll be a legend, et cetera, et cetera. But I just don't see what else he would do. I mean, he seems like a source of information. Sounds like he's got a lot of power now. Sounds like everything's in good order on Navarro. It looks very prosperous. He looks very regal. So I think everything's going really well. Maybe at some point things go bad, and that's what, gets him back into the fray with Mando at some point. But I can't even see the only maybe Mando, again, if he's calling in favors, and like you said earlier, there's a lot of people that owe him a lot of favors. Maybe he calls one into the guild, and the guild says, oh yeah, we'll send some folks over, and a couple people show up, they throw them in some Mando armor, and they help fight. But I'm struggling right now in the narrative of everything else that's already gone on in season 3. I don't know where Grief Karga fits in other than that.
I agree, and that's kind of how he was used in season 2. It was just a hub. Hey, there was a mission they had to go do. There was an Imperial remnant. It did serve the Pershing line and the cloning facilities and things like that. But You're right. I mean, he's got responsibilities here on Navarro. It seems like that is his that's where his interest and his care is making sure that his people are taken care of and that they've turned this around and they keep it going and it's becoming this trade hub for the sector, all those things. So I agree with you. I think his influence on the season is probably pretty limited. But again, we go back and visit him maybe, I mean, at least once, maybe twice. But again, and maybe there's a mission there. Maybe he is a source of information. He has resources available to him. So there's something that we could leverage there. But that he's going to be, out on the hunt with the team and all of that. No, yeah, it doesn't seem likely. It doesn't seem necessary either. I'm with you. He doesn't add anything extra to the team that they're missing. I think at least with Cara Dune, you could make an argument that she was battle hardened, she was battle tested. She had, while you could claim she was muscle, but again, someone you could trust, someone that worked really well with Fennec Shand, can work well on the team, has developed in that kind of way.
And hates the Empire.
And hates the Empire, yeah. I mean, but Grief Karga doesn't necessarily have all of those extra benefits that you would with like a Cara Dune type of character.
Yeah. Plus, I like him in this role where he's just like he's lived a very crazy life and things are just going good now, right? And he's got his own place and he's a leader. He's dressing nice. He's got nice threads. I mean,
he's like what Lando.
Leave him alone.
He's like what Lando should have been, or should have
exactly
how Lando should have ended up, right?
Right. Lando was the telltale of So leave him alone. Let him be successful. And if Mando needs resources or needs help later down the road, hey, I got guys that can do that. All right. Yeah. I found this information because of all my inner workings. He's just kind of that person that he can rely on for some of that stuff and let him be there. Plus, it gives Carl Weathers, who's, not a spring chicken, although the man looks amazing for his age.
Yeah, he does.
He's not out there making movies as much. And I think he likes being behind the camera. So being associated with the series in that capacity, I think he gets, it's better for him too. I had the Night Owls and Mando clans. I think I don't know if you want to add anything specifically. I think both will show up. There's a lot of clans. I'm not going to get into them because we're already on 2 hours now. But like I fully expect to see everybody from the Night Owls that we saw in season 2 come back. We'll see a lot of other clans come in, but I think it's going to be just adding to the fray of fighting inner strife that we're expecting here. Yeah,
there's been some questions about whether Sasha Banks is in the season and that type of thing. But I think in general, though, yeah, we're going to get our fill of Mandalorians. We know Bo-Katan is there. She's the central character. I'd love to see the rest of the Night Owls. That'd be great. But again, it makes sense for them to be there. I think they're going to be instrumental with this season, at least in their presence and what they do. So yeah, I don't think we have to beat that horse any all.
Yeah. Miss Sunflower says, I would like to see Omera return. Me too. There's a love story there.
Oh gosh.
And at some point we'll do the Patreon episode. We'll
it's
talk
definitely
about
backed you up too, but we need the romance. No, we don't.
We do.
We need the romance between Din and like Paz. Like we need bro love.
No, we don't. Omera and that's his like soulmate, man.
That's his
okay,
lobster.
So all right, let's get to the big ones now. Bo-Katan. So I got a question about her real quick.
Sure.
I've seen a lot of people talking about her as, quote, the villain. And I really struggle.
I think that's the wrong word. Yeah.
Yes, it's exactly it. It's the wrong word. She's not the villain. Like, it's okay for her to well, I said I was going to let you talk. You say it first, and then if you don't say it, then I'll get on the soapbox.
Go ahead.
But
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So she's not a villain. What she is, for all the reasons we've already talked about, is someone who feels very passionate about being the ruler of Mandalore. Call it because she had the Darksaber. Call it because her sister was a very successful. Well, okay, maybe that's too far. But her sister was the ruler of Mandalore. It's in her blood, right? She feels like she is the next heir to that throne. There's nothing wrong with her wanting to fight Din Djarin because that is the way, right? That is the custom. She accepts that. She acknowledges that in season 2. So yeah, she's got a chip on her shoulder. Yeah, she wants to fight Din Djarin. Yeah, she doesn't like the Din Djarin's just walking around with that lightsaber, that Darksaber on his hip and swinging it around like no big deal when she doesn't have it.
It can't even lift it properly.
Gosh. Yeah, but it doesn't make her a villain. Are they going to get into a fight? Hell yeah, they're going to get into a fight. I think someone's going to fight for that Darksaber in season 3. Make no mistake about it. And I guarantee you, she is going to be on one side of that battle in some way, in some capacity, because I think she wants it for all the reasons we just said. But that doesn't make her a villain. It doesn't make her a bad person. I think the trailer, when we first saw it, because of her body language and the way her phrases were said, I think people took that, ran crazy with it, and now we vilified her, and that's not fair. She is going to come around. She is a good person. Go watch Rebels. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why she wouldn't suddenly become a bad person or a bad character. She's not. It's just not who she is. I think she's just got her mind set on getting that throne back in whatever way she can, because she wants what's good for her people and feels like, hey, maybe she did get a fair shot. Like you said, we don't know how things went. We don't know how things transpired. And I think when we see that storyline, maybe that gives us more context as to why she is so hell bent on taking back the throne, trying to make things right. Maybe she did screw up and she acknowledges that, and she's trying to right her wrongs and feels like the only way she can do that is with that Darksaber in her hand and sitting in that throne again.
Yeah, I guess I understand where people are kind of coming from, because even season 2, she did come across as a bit power hungry, power thirsty. You know, I will be the leader. I will. She was very assertive with it, that this was her right. Kind of like Paz, right? A little bit like what Paz Vizsla, his mentality of the Darksaber, and maybe not from his was a bit more selfish and more family oriented, but with Bo, it was very much, I'm with you, like leading these people. And I think if I were to really take a step back and think about it, and you think about the alignment of her and Din Djarin at this point, it comes to a single word of atonement. Like whatever happened, like she feels like she has a vested responsibility to fix and to remedy whatever happened. And that led to these series of events where she is personally blamed and maybe has personal responsibility for it. And this is her way of trying to fix that, or at least, you know, put it on the path to being made right. And she just has that deep down, but we've just not got that from her. And I think when we've seen with the heavy emotional presence that she has on some of the teasers of the trailers, I think we need that from her. I think we need that story from her. She needs to tell us what happened. Like what is it that is driving her? What is driving this anger, you know, behind her? What is it about Moff Gideon specifically? You know, with the Darksaber, is there something there? Is there another element to that story rather than he's just the one in her way? There's got to be something more to that. And so I think that's the part of it. And again, I like to connect her and the Mandalorian in that kind of way, because it just feels like they are both on this quest for just atonement and just something to do to, you know, to fix the sins of the past in some way. And for her, it's always been more of a more aggressive nature of it, and fueling that with anger and that rage inside and perhaps self-loathing in some kind of ways. And that's how she's going to make that difference. And that's what fuels her. That's what keeps her motivated. That's what gives her the energy to go on. Otherwise it'll consume you. It'll devastate you if you're not careful, or if you get apathetic towards it all.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe a concern that she's got as well. If I don't have this fury inside of me, then I'll become apathetic. And then what?
Right.
And life's not worth living at that point. So I think that's kind of how I view her. Not definitely, and maybe an antagonist in some ways. I don't really know that. I'm trying to see a scenario where she challenges Din for some reason, you know, because again, it has to be bested in battle. And would you trust Din not to just throw the fight? I mean, he gets honor and things like that, so you would think maybe no, but what purpose would that serve unless he did something to actually piss her off?
Yeah.
You know, and then they'd actually have a fight. It's not just going to be, I challenge you to a duel, sir, and slaps him across his face with a glove.
Right.
I just can't see it in that kind of respect. So I have a hard time understanding how that scenario comes about, you know, unless Din is defeated and then Bo has a chance to beat somebody else, you know, for that. And the saber changes hands once or twice, you know, throughout the season.
Well, the idea that Din Djarin would throw the fight, I can see that with her. He didn't do it with Paz, right?
Right.
Because Paz challenged him, and they went through the.
Well, he wasn't going to give it to Paz though either.
Right, exactly. But I'm saying, what's the difference between him and Bo though? I mean, if anything, he's more aligned with somebody like Paz than he is Bo. So why wouldn't he have given it to her?
I think he respects Bo. I think is the difference, right? You know, she has a mission. She has something that she's trying to do that he could at least understand, and he respects her because they fought alongside battle, and he has with Paz as well. So I can give you that. But again, it was something that he didn't even want. He didn't mean to do it, right? And if you have it, and I think we have to take it within context. And in the moment when he's trying to give it to her, he's like, well, okay, cool. I don't care. He doesn't know anything about it. You know, he's learning on the fly as he goes. And as he learns the importance of it and what he has, and in effect, she teaches him that, which then applies to his interactions with Paz. You know, to where he's just not going to give it over permanently. He'll hand it to the armor for inspection and everything else. But I just don't. It's a little bit different when the scenarios, I think, of when he was trying to give it back to Bo-Katan because he had no idea what it was for the most part.
Yeah. Right. I just, I'm going to give him the benefit. I'm going to give Din Djarin the benefit of the doubt, saying that at some point, well, maybe not right now. Like right now, I'm with you. Like I think he would just throw the fight and say, "Here, take it." Oh, you
Well,
won.
I don't think he would throw the fight, but that was the theory of like, what, what's he supposed to do? I mean,
Right. Yeah. But I think through the course of going through the caves, going through his, for doing whatever the trials are for his transgressions, I think through all of this, I think there is going to be some kind of a learning, some experience for him where he comes to understand the significance of the saber, what it means to be a Mandalorian, the history and all that. And I think he'll come out being more respectful of that. And maybe he does accept that he accepts Bo-Katan saying, like, you're right. Like, I understand why it has to be one in combat, whether maybe he comes around to that idea. I don't think that's the case. I'm just saying that maybe that's a possibility. A more likely scenario would be him losing it to someone else in some way and Bo-Katan getting it back from that person.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a Paz, maybe, because Paz and Bo are really kind of on two sides of the same coin in some ways. And they both want the dark saber. So I imagine at some point they're probably going to fight more than I would see Din Djarin fight. I just don't see, and I think they've done this when the trailers, I think they've done it to kind of set people up and get you talking and thinking, but I don't see a scenario where she's, quote, the villain. He walks in, she pulls out something and she goes at him and they get into a big fight and she wins it. And that just doesn't, the story doesn't go the way we expect it to at that point.
Well, why she's pissed at Din Djarin, they still respect one another. And I think they both understand that they need each other too. Because, I mean, clearly she knew that she needed him in season 2 in order to get a ship, get weapons, all these things that she wanted them to do the mission wise in order to get the information for Ahsoka Tano. So I think along with respect and, for their goal for Din to achieve his goal on Mandalore, he needs someone like Bo-Katan to help him understand Mandalore. And so they still need each other in these different ways. So there is still, it's mutually beneficial for them to both work together in some ways and not, while there might be a little tension between them, is not necessarily bad blood. Because I think Bo-Katan, while she might be pissed, is like, well, he didn't really know what he was doing either. He's just a kid. He's just a kid of the watch, and they don't know what they're doing.
Yep. Miss Sunflower asked, did Moff Gideon steal the darksaber or did he win it in battle against Bo? We don't know the full story there, but knowing what we know, I would assume he just took it. Like he has no reason to win it in fair battle. Fair battle means nothing to him. So it's safe to assume he just took it and,
Yeah,
he never declared himself as leader of Mandalore. Although I say that, but maybe he is. Like we talked about the Empire being there. He's probably running around that thing, saying that he is.
And Giancarlo Esposito has been saying weird things, in interviews back even just from a few months ago about he's got this unhealthy obsession with the Mandalorians. Like he wants to be one in some level, and so it's very confusing because he'd always stop short of saying whatever it was he was going to say. So we don't really know what Moff Gideon's hang up with the Mandalorian is. But we also know he's not exactly one of honor. Right. And we saw that when they were holding Grogu and he tried to basically stabbed in the back.
Yeah. Well, let's move into where's Bo-Katan at the end of the series, at the end of season 3?
I mean, I'm assuming probably on the throne of Mandalore is my assumption. I think she will end up being the rightful leader of Mandalore at the end of the day. I mean, I think that's kind of is being touted as her destiny. And again, I don't know that I see, while Den might be the one to be the champion, I'm still not sure he's the leader of an entire culture. But we'll have to see what the season goes. He's not there yet. He's made a lot of strides. We've talked a lot about this. I think he's made a lot of strides towards that, where early on he was definitely not that. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. But I think Bo-Katan, she has some work to get there too, I think. So she's not the de facto, right? Just because she wants it and has a lot of passion with it and has an idea or a plan, all this other stuff. But I think when you look at someone who you would like to see it from an overall story perspective of bringing everything we've known from the last 20 plus years, in the timeline from Clone Wars into Rebels and all of that, it'd be great to see Bo-Katan get that, just rebuild her name, rebuild her family, honor her sister. I think those types of things would be really great narratively to give her that opportunity to do that rather than continue to give that to Din Djarin. Because I like the idea that Din Djarin still has a certain amount of flexibility and openness to do whatever he would want to do in season 4.
Yeah. I don't see her on the throne, but more on that later.
Okay,
Moff Gideon. Let's see. Any reason to think? I mean, I had the question here. What does he want with Grogu? I don't think anything's changed there. I think we all would agree that it's the midichlorians and Palpatine and all that. He's been talking. Giancarlo Esposito has been talking this last week, 2 weeks ago, about how we're going to see him. He beam off Gideon suddenly on a tear. I forget. I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he's going to be, have a lot of life in him again and fighting and that sort of thing. So I would assume he's going to get loose, right? He was captured at the end of season 2, and we didn't see him in Book of Boba Fett. He's part of the larger narrative that has to deal with Thrawn. This theory of maybe they're his headquarters, or he set up shop on Mandalore. I think that makes sense for me in my head. So he's going to get away. I don't know how that happens, but I can't see him being locked up, and that's the end of his story. So
yeah, and I like that. I mean, he's been the villain in both season 1 and season 2, right? At least in some levels and some positions of it. So I like that he's the common thread villain, that he keeps getting out, he escapes. Then that's where the conflict is. You at least have someone that you can pinpoint as, they're the enemy. And again, we know that there's bad blood. We know that his influence and what he has contributed to with Mandalore, there's a lot of history there. Bo-Katan knows it. So when you're looking for a villain, it's easy to keep using that one. And he is such an amazing actor and just has this presence to him. And he's very familiar to us at this point. And so I think it just makes a lot of sense for that to continue to be the case. And again, let's see him truly unleash, right? He was kind of a badass in season 1 towards the end, what we saw. But they teased it at the end of season 1, but we didn't really necessarily get it all. We saw the ruthlessness, but let's actually see him on a tear. Let's see what makes him so bad. What are the atrocities that he committed on Mandalore? And let's see him truly bring that to the forefront and do it again, or at least attempt to do it again, and give our Mandalorian friends a reason to unite and a common enemy to go up against, right? A common threat that they can all agree cannot happen again.
No.
And so I like the idea that he is the bad guy. I mean, he is the villain of the story.
Yep. Let's move to Grogu.
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him. He's the little green guy.
Baby Yoda
right there. Albert's little green friend.
Oh, got it. Baby Yoda.
Baby Yoda. Okay. So for Baby Yoda, there's, I guess, what do you think? Let's talk about his force abilities just really quickly. How much do you think we're going to see him use the training that Luke gave him in that short time, or however much time transpired? I don't even know if they put a time on that yet.
I haven't seen a time. They said, because even with Jon Favreau's comments lately, it's been, there's been time between season 2 and season 3, but I think part of what he was referencing was Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
And so we know there's been some number of months in between all of that. So I think if we said this was roughly a year after season 2, that seems maybe reasonable. Not too long, but long enough to where some abilities for Grogu have come out. So I think with his force abilities, I think this is something that we will see a different Grogu. We will see a more mature Grogu, especially with able to use his powers, able to use them without, as much fatigue. But what are the things that we will see him do? That's a good question, because he's still in the pram, right? He's still going around. He's not walking around on his own like a Yoda would be.
Yeah.
But clearly more confidence in his abilities. And I think some of it, though, when we start to see some of those negative traits come out, I think is going to be the interesting part of it. Are we going to see the fear and the dark side, kind of like we saw in season 2? Are we going to see any of that manifest itself in a more serious nature and less controlled fashion than what he was doing with, quote unquote, bad guys? And so I think there's some interesting developments there for Grogu, and Favreau seems to, wants us to believe at least that we will see, more Force stuff from Grogu.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll see it. I think it'll be more controlled. I think that more than anything, I think that's what Luke was trying to set out to do, is kind of reel him in so that he's not getting exhausted and he has more control over his abilities. But I don't know that he's learned how to do, new things, new tricks. I think it's probably some of the same stuff, but just, again, more tempered and able to wield those powers when he needs to. I think he's an interesting character. The question keeps coming up about, is he a Mandalorian? Is he a Force user? I think he's going down the path of both. Like, I really do. Like, and this is a very intriguing concept, because we had it, the last we had it was it Tar Vizsla? I can't remember if they said he was Force sensitive.
Yeah, I believe
I want
so.
to say he was because he trained with the Jedi, didn't he? So
he was a Jedi, yeah.
he was a Jedi, yeah. So we haven't had, I mean, at least from a canon perspective, even in Legends, we've not had a character that has been, I guess, the best of both worlds, right? I mean, if you talk about the two most powerful warriors, and I'm using air quotes because Yoda would be offended, but you're talking about Jedi and you're talking about Mandalorians, and you got somebody who's kind of right in the middle with both. And somebody like that could be a character that years from now, past New Republic, past the Rise of Skywalker, because of his age, I mean, he could be in a whole new era of time in Star Wars and be that character still, right? And that really is kind of intriguing. There's lots of possibilities there. So I am interested in seeing all that. I don't think he's going to pull out the lightsaber in season 3.
That's because
I have a theory that he has it.
It's because he doesn't have one.
I think he has it. Or I think if he doesn't have it and he wanted it, I think he
Luke would not have given. Oh gosh, I can't do this with you again. Luke didn't give it to him. Luke made him make a choice. He chose the vest, the shirt, over the lightsaber. Why would Luke say, "Oh no, sorry, bro, you go take it"?
No, he put it in his lunchbox. He put a little note. It said, "You will know when the time comes to use this," and he stuck it in there right underneath the sandwich. Sent him on his way.
No, what Luke did
at some point
in the thermos, it wasn't a hot soup. He put a cold soup that Grogu doesn't like, and was like, "Hey, maybe next time you'll make a better choice and you'll get hot soup, not cold soup, in your thermos, in your lunchbox."
I think he's going to wield the lightsaber. At some point, he's got to wield a lightsaber. And the idea that he's wielding one from dead Yoda that they found.
What if he wields the dark saber?
No, it's too big.
It's off. Well, maybe he makes his own dark saber.
He'll take the Force crystal out and then make a smaller one. Okay.
Yeah, what powers the dark saber anyway?
I would imagine it's kyber crystal of some sort. Black kyber crystal. Duh. Okay, let's see. Where are we with Grogu? Man, we're in hour 3. Wow. Okay, so how about who saved Grogu? So I think we're going to. I was going to ask the question: are we going to see it? I think we're going to see it. I don't see why they would have teased it so much at this point and go, "Oh, sorry, you're still not going to find out another 8 episodes." I think we're done. I think we're going to see it. I don't. I've got a lot of theories, none of which are grounded or foundational in terms of who it is, but. Who would you like to see?
You
can use the ones that I've got here. Those are mine.
Saving him. It's definitely not Mace Windu. Why that name keeps popping up, I don't understand. It makes no sense. Mace Windu was too busy falling out of a window when Order 66 was happening.
Well, maybe it was like right before that, like moments before. He just got back into there, and then Anakin came down. He was just out of breath.
Okay, I can't. And then Lauren's over here talking about Hayden Christensen.
I know. This is
like between the two of you. I can't do this.
Are we going to see Hayden on the other side of the door? So here, okay, well, maybe.
Yeah, as a dark stalker preference, maybe.
Right. But I've seen a lot of people here recently today, as a matter of fact, talking about how, it's Anakin that saved Grogu. And I'm just like,
that doesn't make any sense.
What? How do you get there? Like,
yeah, he just slaughtered a bunch of kids. And he's in the chamber doing it again and did it to Reva. So
yeah,
I'm going to go ahead and call shenanigans on that one.
Yeah, that's not happening.
I mean, you've got
so Mace Windu. No, I don't.
Yeah, that's more of a joke. But I mean, yeah. So you have Jocasta Nu in here. I guess that could be possible if you trust the comics at all, which is difficult to do because of course they showed later Yoda's lightsaber being destroyed, and why would a Jedi make 2 of the exact same lightsaber when they had one that was perfectly working? Doesn't make sense.
But
not that I'm bitter about that one. Yeah, that aside, Jocasta Nu could make some sense. I think there's probably some other Jedi. Does it have to be a named one that we know? I think not necessarily. Does it matter who saved Grogu specifically from a name? I don't think it really does, though. Does it? I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I just don't know that I don't know that it matters to me if it was. If it was Jocasta Nu, it's like, okay, cool. It's more of an Easter egg than anything else. Is what it feels like to me. I think that's what it's been relegated as. I don't know if there's any vast importance to it at this point because Ahsoka doesn't know. It wasn't Ahsoka. She definitely wasn't the one to do it. And she has no idea. And she couldn't get that from Grogu either. So, who got him
but that
out?
was a plot convenience. But yeah, I'm with you.
Well, sure. Yeah. But again, we know it's not her though. We've at least eliminated her. And Mace Windu and Anakin Skywalker. Sorry, it wasn't Anakin at the time. It was Darth Vader. Darth Vader would not have let him escape.
True. Master Terra Sanube. This is what Miss Sunflower is saying.
Well, I mean, there could be something to that because I mean, Obi-Wan finds him encased in amber, right? in the Kenobi
Yeah.
series. So
We saw that in the Kenobi series.
yeah. So I mean, again, there's a whole list of Jedi, but again, they all seem Easter eggish to me. To be honest with you, I just don't
Right.
know that there's any relevance or vast importance behind a lot of it, because then we'd have to get into a whole backstory about why that meant anything, and I just don't know that it's relevant. Not to be, I'm not just trying to poo-poo on it all. I just don't. It's really cool scenes we keep getting. I think we want to know. We're interested in more about Order 66 because it was just such a traumatic event, and to see it through Grogu's eyes is just so interesting, and it is to me as well. But I think some of the specifics on it don't always really matter a whole lot.
Yeah. Barriss Offee comes up a lot because we don't know what happened to her. You know, she's like still the missing link here. Like, she could be out there, could not be out there.
But it just
there's a lot of theories as to
doesn't
who
make sense though. Yeah.
Well, either way, I'm with you. Like, here, the more intriguing part is just how he got away.
Yeah.
Because if that is Anakin coming through the other side, how the heck did he survive that? Right? Who sacrificed their life to make sure that he gets away, or who defended him and got him out? Who had the smarts to get away from Darth Vader?
And it couldn't have been just one.
Arguably at his strongest moment.
Yeah, it couldn't have been just one either, right? For everything that was going on in the temple, it would have had to been handed off. Like, it would have been multiple people down the line taking
like
a lightsaber to the back.
He's the Darksaber. He's like, sorry, I was going to say he's the Death Star plans in Rogue One, where they're just like handing him off and he's just slaughtering people. That same.
That's actually a great.
What if they did a shot for shot, but they're handing off the baby instead of the Death Star plans?
Yeah, Grogu's just help us.
No. Yeah,
that's actually kind of how I view it, though. To be honest with you,
Okay.
I kind of view it that way. They can't be just one. It seems unlikely it would just be one. It would have to be kind of a network in order to get him out. For him to be so close to the clones and be able to escape, and for them to be kind of forgotten about, it just seems like there had to have been something else at play there.
Right.
So again, interesting story, but who it is, I don't know if it matters a whole lot. Yeah.
Yeah. How he got away is more intriguing, more interesting than who it was. Whoever it is at that point is, just like you said, Easter eggish and bears no significance at that point, other than just us being able to kind of check the box and say, okay, well, we know what happened to that Jedi.
Right. We also know it was not Kanan Jarrus.
Thank you. You are a man of insight beyond your own years.
Yes.
Okay.
I can give you a list of who it was not. There's a long list.
There's a list. Here's a fun question. Will Grogu speak basic?
No.
In this?
Next.
Did you say no?
I said no. Next.
What?
Why?
Say yes.
He's still cooing and cawing.
He got a word out. What was it?
Yep. I mean, it's just like, it was more like
yep.
It was. Okay, then he's already spoken basic. So why are you asking the question?
Is he going to speak more basic, more complex basic? Will he say yes, sir? Or I'm kidding. Okay.
No, the real question is he going to speak Yaddle or is he going to speak Yoda?
He'll speak Yaddle. They're not going through the Frank Oz, somebody impersonate him. I mean, it's a lot of work.
Well, it wouldn't be Frank Oz because it wouldn't be as deep or what's the word? Gravelly voice is that?
Yeah. I'm not saying they bring Frank Oz, but I'm saying why go through the exercise of trying to get somebody to do that voice or do something similar? We can just say, you know what? He grew up around people that speak normal basic without an accent, and that's what he speaks. And he's just like Yaddle. Thank you, Bryce Dallas Howard. So, okay. And I had the question of, will Grogu be more Jedi than Mando? I think he'll be both. I can't see where he would. He's going to use the Force powers, and I think he's going to learn the ways of the Mandalorian. So he's both, right?
Well, not Jedi though. He would be, just like you said, a Force user. But I think it'd be more Mando than Jedi, clearly. But I think it would be a Mando Force user, and Jedi is not really relevant.
Yeah, you're right.
At this point, he's evolved past some of his Jedi trainings, I think.
You're right. You're right. Yep, that's right. He's not a Jedi. We can't be using that word so lightly. All right, let's move to Din Djarin. I think we've talked a lot about him already, just through the context of everything else.
Right.
Will he be forgiven for his transgressions? I think the answer is yes. I think he comes out of the caves and he's purified and he's been enlightened in some ways. Maybe this is we're going down the hero's journey. There's a part in here where he comes out, he's reborn at that point.
Or he dies and Grogu takes his helmet.
Okay.
Oh, wait, so there's Razor Crest moment.
Is that your Razor Crest moment?
No.
That question's here. We're almost there.
That's not my Razor Crest moment.
How much do you think he really wants the Darksaber?
Who?
Like, I'm with you. Like, I don't know that he...
No, Din Djarin doesn't want that thing at all.
Yeah. And how much do you think he wants to lead the Mandalorians?
I think almost as little as he wants that darksaber.
Hmm.
Because he doesn't know how to use it. He's fighting it too. So
I have to stick to my theory that he does. I think we've got a lot of episodes here for us to get that out of the way. The speech that he's given about who are we, what do we stand for, what do we fight for, all that stuff. I mean, that feels like he's come around to the idea of at least reuniting for the purpose of taking back Mandalore, which is really all I want to see. I don't necessarily have to have him be the leader. I'd love to see that, but I don't think that's where it needs to go. I do think he needs to be the one that reunites everybody and brings everybody together. And at that point, that introduces a very interesting concept of like, okay, well, people are going to look at him as though he is the Mandalore, right? You were the one that had a darksaber. You brought us all together. You should lead. And I still think he's going to have a hard time coming to grips with that being, the case. Like, that's really who he should be. So I think he reunites everybody, but I'm with you. I don't know that he necessarily, I think it would be cool for him to still want to, or still have the darksaber on his hip going into season 4 and 5. But I just can't see. I think he's going to lose that to whoever is the leader at that point.
yeah, the question was whether he wants it though, and I think
Right.
Yeah, he doesn't really want it. But
Yeah.
I think he understands I think he's understanding and learning the importance of it. And I'm with you. He's a Mandalorian. They don't throw weapons away.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's going to be on his belt. He's going to keep it with him because
Yep.
why not? And again, I think he's curious about how to figure out how to wield it in order to embrace that. Because I think that it's fighting him and he's fighting it just doesn't make any sense. Like why? Like what is this thing? And getting a little more of that kind of background, that story of how that works, I think that's interesting too. Like what does it mean to give into it? Because we saw Moff Gideon using it quite well and without
Mhm.
any apparent issues at all, where Paz and Din really struggled to use it at all. And of course, this is very different than what we had in previous content in the animated series. But so it's interesting to see how that changes, if it changes, and then like how a Bo-Katan, wields it as well, if she's actually able to get her hands on it.
Yeah. That aspect of it being heavy, the weight of it feeling heavy, that's very different than a lightsaber, completely different than a lightsaber. But yeah, we'll see if that plays into it at some point too, whoever should wield it.
More in line with original George Lucas idea of a lightsaber, though.
Yep. Well, it's consistent too, because we saw it in Rebels. She was having a hard time wielding it or swinging it around too. Her being Sabine when she was being trained by Kanan.
Oh, that's right.
What about anything else? I don't want to fly past Mandalorian because he's the main character, but we've talked a lot about him already. So is there anything that I've left out? Anything that we feel like is still unanswered? I mean, I think the big question about, okay, where does he end up at the end of season 3 is out there, but
yeah, I think the one leap for him though is some of the quotes that we get in the trailers about, who are we as a people? What do we stand for? How does he make it to that point? Because I don't think he's there. I think he's understanding bits of that as he goes.
Mhm.
But why does that equate to the Mandalorians?
Yeah.
So what is it about that? What does he see that gets him over that hill to be able to get to that point to where, again, that's more of the leadership that you've been looking for, of saying, okay, this is why he would lead the people, by asking those types of questions, right?
Right.
And I'm with you. When you get to that point, you're like, okay, you're starting to show me something. Yeah, but what is it that gets him to that point? Because everything else we're seeing is very focused on him. It's more of like, what do I need to do to atone for my sins? Not what do I need to do in order to rebuild our people and to rebuild who we are as a culture and as a civilization. And so they're very different. So there's a lot of growth there and a lot of change for him still too to experience. I think that'll be fun to watch.
Yeah. I mean, he even has that line in there of like, our people are scattered like stars in the galaxy. I mean, this is all very inspirational in how he's speaking, and
right.
The Din Djarin that we know right now, I don't know that I'm with you. But like I said, there are a lot of episodes, and I feel like through the events of what's going on, I think he's going to come to realize that he may be the only person that can unite them. He doesn't have to necessarily be the leader, but they have to have a united front against the Empire to weed out everybody that's there or whatever it is. And, at that point, I think he'll then pass it on, because otherwise, if he doesn't, then he's the leader of Mandalore. He gets landlocked at that point, to me, right? From a storytelling perspective, it suddenly becomes everything happens on Mandalore. We never get to see him going around the galaxy and all. And I think that's kind of what we love about the Mandalorian right now. So unless they're willing to go through this metamorphic change of who the character is and the story that they're trying to tell, I don't know how that plays into the larger narrative of the other stuff. I just don't see Mando doing that. So I think it's somebody else at the end of the day.
Great.
Okay, speed round, and we'll call it a night. We already talked the Book of Boba Fett. Okay, does the Razor Crest return?
No.
Not yet. Will we see our first live action Gotal?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, I'll go with yes, sure.
I threw that in there. How many dank ferrets are we going to get?
I'm going to go with 4. One every other, basically one every other episode, yeah.
I'm going with 6.
Yeah.
4 and 6.
True, we got multiples in one episode sometimes. Yeah.
How many montages are we going to get?
2.
2 montages. Okay, that seems a little low, but I'll at least it's 2. You want to play Death Watch?
Oh,
Who
sure.
dies? So this is a question we normally ask on the Final Hype, but anybody who dies? I mean, who died last season?
I don't think anybody died last season.
Yeah,
And
they don't have to die, but
no one died in Book of Boba Fett either, right?
is there anybody?
I mean,
I thought Chrysanthemum should have died,
note,
or
yeah.
I
guess
Boba
Madame
Fett should
Garza
have
did. Garza Whip died.
Oh yeah, she died. Oh,
But but from a
she's a
hero,
good-looking lady.
like from the heroes and all of that, no one really died. It's
all
hard
right. But
to
you want to
say.
make a call? Anybody dying this season?
Actually, no, I kind of don't. It might be someone like maybe I think some Mandalorians are going to die, but are they going to be named characters though? Is the question. And so far, this series has not been willing to kill main characters, so it's difficult to change that now.
Yeah,
I think the opportunity is there. I think maybe the one I would put on the list maybe would be Moff Gideon, because I think at some point maybe he's no longer your villain. You feel like that's been played, that's tired, and he needs to go. So I guess maybe I'll put Moff Gideon on that list. But from a hero perspective, I think the only one I'd put on that list maybe would be Paz or the Armorer.
Well, I was going to say Paz as my go. I hate to see the Armorer go, but somebody like Paz could go.
But maybe
valiantly.
the Armorer would be one of those moments of doing what was right, even though she still disagreed with everyone. I mean, it's a trope, but
yeah,
it could
same thing with Paz.
Meaningful.
Finally coming around, realizing what was right, and then dying off. I can see that.
Right.
But I'm with you. This one doesn't feel like we're going to have, we're going to have the casualties, but as far as main characters, it's a pretty, even if you go back to the list, I don't know. I can't see anybody in here dying. Maybe Babu Frick. No, I'm kidding. No.
Maybe
I think we're okay. Now, somebody that would be shocking would be somebody like Bo-Katan for the same reasons, right?
Yeah.
Finally coming together, finally being on the throne, and then, or whatever, getting the Darksaber or whatever she goes through and dying in the course of the battle. That would be pretty tragic, and it would bring an end to her pretty long career. She's got a pretty good story, I guess. Right?
But we also know Dave Filoni does not like killing characters at all. And I think that would be a really difficult for him to want to end.
But this is Favreau's story, though.
I know.
I think he's got to. I think he's got to check in with him, though. First.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, they're definitely in this together, even if it's Favreau's series. But yeah, I think it would be difficult for Filoni to throw his weight behind that one.
Okay, Razor Crest moment. This is for anybody that doesn't know. This is a prediction that no one could predict, or it's so out there that it's crazy, but yet it comes true.
I think we will see a mythosaur.
Oh, that's not crazy.
Maybe because they're a creature of myth. They don't exactly exist. They exist anymore.
I liked it. Okay, I wasn't poo-pooing on the idea because I actually love that idea.
Now I don't know if it'll be a full-grown mythosaur, but maybe an egg or something like that. That there's that hope, and that there is the rise of the Mandalore is imminent type of thing. And there's if anything, that's as much of a symbol of the Mandalorian strength as anything else, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so I think that would be very telling.
It would be for the Suka.
Oh, Suka. My bad.
Yeah. Get it right, dude. I speak Jawa. Did you know that? I think
you are furry.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
But I can see maybe as part of going to the caves and having spent time on Mandalore, maybe he looks at that as okay, this is kind of like Boba Fett, right? When he had the Rancor, he didn't have a mythosaur, but he used that as a way to this is who I am kind of thing, right? Really reaching back into the lore of the Mandalorians. I can see where, and I think we threw this theory out there at some point. Maybe it was in season 2. We were talking about this where We want to see the return. And it would be very Favreau to bring the Mythosaur to life, right?
Right. We need our monster of the week type of thing, or monster
Sure.
of the series. Yeah.
But yeah, taming one, even if he comes charging out on one and he's got the Darksaber in his hand, I mean, can you imagine how much the other Mandalorian clans would be like, holy crap, this is happening,
How do you not get behind that, right?
Exactly. It's the symbolism
how many
right?
more signs do you need that you've checked all the
Yes.
boxes of the second
Right.
coming of the Mandalore?
Yeah. That'd be great.
I had another one too, but at the beginning of the show, and I have since forgotten it because we've gone over 2.5 hours now. But what about you? What's
That's
your
fine.
Razor Crest moment?
Okay, so my Razor Crest moment, I think, is maybe subdued, but I think and I know you're going to poo-poo it. You're going to be like, how? That doesn't make any sense. But again, it's supposed to be shocking. But I think the true leader at the end of all of this, I think the person that's going to come out on the throne with the Darksaber is going to be Paz.
Really?
And I think it would be poetic in that it started with a Vizsla, and you have this character who hasn't been really well liked, and he seems like a dark horse and like not the right person. But through the course again of what we're about to see, if he is a part of what's going on, he finally comes around, and everybody realizes that it's not going to be a Bo-Katan because she had her shot, even with her royalty and all that. It's not going to be the Mandalorian because he did what he needed to do by bringing all the clans together, at least to get the bad guys out and start over. Who else is going to be? Who else could lead? At least from the characters that we know, it's the only choices left are somebody like the Armorer, which I don't think she'd be the right person.
Right.
But I can see Paz, like, again, where does he really believes in that he wants to do what's right for his people. Now he's got to get past his ways, right? So there's some reconditioning that needs to happen. But if he does come around, then maybe I think it's poetic justice that it would be a Vizsla that suddenly rises to power and is wielding the Darksaber and once again. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that have to happen, but I mean, it's an interesting idea, though. Yeah, I won't poo-poo that one at all. I think it's an interesting idea. There's a lot that has to happen, though. I think he would have to really be in a lot of episodes, I think, in order for that to happen effectively.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think if you look at any character except maybe Din Djarin, well, even Din Djarin on some level, every character has pros and cons and things that are realistic of like, okay, that could work, but also why would anyone follow that person? Like when it comes to taking on the mantle of the Mandalore or leading the Mandalorians or being their champion of sorts.
Right.
So I think there's drawbacks to all of them, and there's pros to some of them and many of them in some cases. But so I don't think there's a perfect candidate so that we would throw anybody away at this point, at least of the main characters that we have of being like a Bo-Katan, a Din, Armorer, or a Paz. And maybe there's others as well. But of those four,
Christopher Lloyd,
yeah, sure. But Boba Fett, I guess we can just throw him in there too.
No, not Boba Fett.
All right, Cobb Vanth, not really a Mandalorian anyway, but
sure,
people seem to think that he is. I don't know how that works, but okay.
Yeah.
But I think you look at it though, and they all have flaws.
You can make an argument for them.
Yes, yeah.
One way or the other.
They all
Some
have
are
a
weaker than
connection.
others, but
They'll have a connection to be able to do it at the very least, even if it's it takes a little more effort to get them there, to truly unify everyone and to lead everyone,
right,
and not just their personal individual belief system. They would all have to do something different in order for that to work. So they all have work to do, I think, in that regard. So I don't think it's crazy at all.
So going to the comments, what and who? That's from Dale and obviously Subdued. So we're talking about our Razor Crest moment. So this is like something so unpredictable that we're predicting it. So it's not who I truly believe will be at the end of the day. I want Bo-Katan to be the leader, and I think she probably will be the leader of Mandalore, right?
I thought you wanted to be Din Djarin.
No,
Make up your mind,
I want Din
man.
Djarin to bring everybody together.
Oh, I
wouldn't hate it if Din Djarin was there too. But
okay.
Who do I think will be for the series? I think it's going to be Bo-Katan.
Okay, gotcha.
Who would I prefer out of everybody?
Grogu.
No, he can't speak basic. Who is he going to say yep to everything? That's not. You don't want a yep man. But I would want Din Djarin to be my heart would be with Din Djarin. But my Razor Crest moment, like so crazy, far left field, way out there, wacko theory, it's going to be somebody like Paz Vizsla. And I know, like you said, to your point, it takes a lot to get there, but hey, who knows? We didn't think the Razor Crest was going to blow up, which is where this whole thing comes from. Okay. All right, let's wrap it up. I mean, final predictions on, I guess, what does it mean to be a Mandalore at the end of season 3? Like, where does season 4 lead into at that point? I know there's a lot that we don't have to work off of here.
Well, I was going to save that for hour 4.
Tonight, okay, so. Well, let's spend the next 26 minutes talking about the Peli Motto and Major Domo ship. Here's something else too. Bo-Katan has to live because now that they got all of their like angst out of the way, then we can ship Bo-Katan and Din Djarin.
Whoa.
For season 4.
So we're going to create a love triangle then with Omara?
There you go. We'll bring Omara into this. Yes.
Oh boy, man.
No, seriously. Okay, so where are we? No, stop. It's too late. We can't be doing this. Okay, so what about your final thoughts and predictions on what's the state of Mandalore? What does it mean to be a Mandalore? How much of that's going to change, if any? And then, I don't even know that you need to speculate on season 4 because God, who knows at this point? But
right. I think it's important that we are going to need clarity. We're going to get clarity around what it means to be a Mandalorian. I mean, Din Djarin is asking the question in a very pointed way. And while it's a bit existential at this point, maybe in how he's doing it, I think it has to be answered. I mean, that's what is going to make change. That's what's going to make a fundamental difference. And for them to come together and fight whatever, whether it's fighting whatever evil is against them, like a Moff Gideon or whatever the Empire might be doing on Mandalore. But, what is the future of this culture? They have to answer the question now because they're just growing more. They're just dwindling further and further every day that goes by, because when they do surface, they're getting taken out. And we know they're fighting fights and we know they're dying and they can't replenish their ranks fast enough. And so I think it's going to be a very key question that has to be answered. I think it's going to be the most compelling part of the series. I think that's what it keeps coming back to, is that Mandalore and what is going on, what has happened, what they want to do is going to continue to be the most compelling, the most interesting part of this season for the show. And it's actually, I think, probably the thing I'm most excited about. I think this is the thing that is really going to bring people to it. I think it might be a little slower at times, but I think that can be a really, if any of the other content that we've had over the last couple of years has been any, evidence of this, is that could be a really great thing in order to give us that time for that to develop and not rush through it and just bounce from, episode to episode. Like season 1 did a bit of that, but season 2 took a little more time. Even though it did move around a little bit, it did sink its teeth more into the story. And so I'm excited for season 3 to do more of that with a more focused amount of content with a really clear direction as to what they're doing. So that's what I'm most excited about for the season.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to this. I like the redefining of what a Mandalore means. They've talked about this in season 1. We've got Boba Fett, who's kind of like this poster child for, hey, everything about him, should be a Mandalorian, but no one accepts him. They make fun of him. They mock him. They tell him to take the armor off, right? All of those old ways are probably going to be gone at the end of the season. And we are going to get a redefinition of what it means to be a Mandalore. And I think it's more in line with what we're seeing from Din Djarin. I think there's more acceptance, or at least tolerance, in terms of the ways and what's right, what's wrong on both sides, right? The Bo-Katans and the Armorers and all the other factions that we're still going to learn about here in season 3. I think at that point, that's the only way they're going to be unified again, right? And what I think they're really trying to do here is we've got Thrawn looming in the background as kind of this ultimate bad. And going back to something recently is when Jon Favreau was talking, I was talking about just 2 days ago, he was talking about how they were kind of laying out the roadmap of where all this is going to go. And this is, again, speaking to what he talked about 4 years ago now, which was that the Star Wars television is kind of leading up to, quote, a big event. It's right. The same thing that Teva was talking about, right? Carson Teva was talking about. There's something very dangerous going to happen. And I think we're too quick to say, it's the First Order or it's Palpatine. I don't think they're talking about that. I think they're talking about the return of Thrawn and his army and them coming back. And I think they can still have, I know this sounds crazy, but I still think they can still, I'm not going to say they're going to go to Air Empire, right? But I think they with Thrawn coming back, he poses such a threat that could have changed does he live or should he live? That would really change the course of the First Order and everything. And so where I'm going with this is they're probably going to have some kind of an epic contained battle between Thrawn and these rebel forces. I'm going to call them rebel forces, but really it's going to be the Mandalorians. It's going to be the Mandos coming together, being called upon to help, because I can't see the New Republic doing it. And I don't know that, maybe it's outside the scope of Luke Skywalker. I don't know how they get there with him. And that's always the X factor here. But I just feel like they're going to try to tell that story, and they're going to need the Mandalorians as kind of that primary force. We're getting to see them be rebuilt and start growing along with everybody else that's being brought in. Ahsoka, maybe Ezra comes back, but it feels like that is going to be the big event. So, all the clans coming together, a wide acceptance in terms of what the Mandalorian means, and somebody like, Mando kind of leading that charge is where we're going with all of it. I think there's probably more acceptance than necessarily people dropping their old traditions and values. I don't think that's really going to happen, but I think people are going to see Din Djarin as kind of the example and follow his lead. And whatever he does, I think the other people will fall in line, whether that's him taking his helmet off or, falling more in line with, I think maybe there's a blend of old versus new, right?
I mean, how powerful would that be if they took a helmet off and everybody took their helmets off? I mean,
that's what I said earlier.
Yeah,
remember?
That'd be pretty crazy. Yeah.
It would be cool to see that. I mean, just, thousands of people that have gathered after all this war, and they're all pulling their helmets off.
And then the armor just shoots them all.
Apostates, all of you.
That's right.
But I think that's exactly what we're setting up some way. We're setting up the forces that we're going to need to tell the larger Star War that's going to happen when Thrawn comes back. Because I do feel like he is the ultimate baddie in this grand scheme.
Good stuff, man. Lots of fun to come.
Yeah. Well, we're not doing tomorrow's episode. I'm too tired. No, we're still gonna do our top 3 tomorrow of season 2, which should be a lot more. Will be shorter and a lot of fun. But this was good. I mean, I know we went in almost 3 hours here, and it's been a while since we've done a 3-hour show, but this is important stuff. I think we've left no stone unturned.
Yeah, and talking about tomorrow, so on our Patreon show, which is going to be live stream available for everybody, of course, Lauren's going to join us as well, and then Cab and Cole are going to rejoin the show. They run the first episode. Rob's not able to join us, but we'll make sure to get his top 3 in there as well. But yeah, we're going to top 3 moments from Mandalorian season 2. So a fantastic season. We're going to go through all of those. I've got my list ready. I'm ranking and re-ranking and re-ranking, which is becoming very frustrating to try to figure out where I want to go with all of this. So we're going to have a lot of fun tomorrow. Again, everybody that was in the live chat tonight, thank you so much. We had a really lively and fun chat. Lauren, Nase, Sky, Alex, Jonathan, Qui-Gon J, Dale, Ben, Jordan, Miss Sunflower, Susan, Diablo Cooling, Risk, Hard Countered, Staff, obviously Subdued. If I missed anybody, my apologies. But thank you all so much for a very lively and fun chat. There was a lot of fun ribbing going back and forth. Very respectful, of course. So we appreciate everyone for everything you bring to the show. It really is, it means a lot to us. We have a lot of fun, and this is why we like doing the live stream. So it's pretty cool. And if you're curious about coming out to a live stream, cantinacast.com/YouTube will show you all of our content in the past, as well as what we have scheduled. And we've already got, again, tomorrow's schedule, and we've got premiere night on Wednesday, March 1st. We will be live with Lauren the day that the episode is released for The Mandalorian. March 1. Yeah. So we will be here, and we'll bring you all of our breakdown coverage. We will go for 5 hours if we have to get all of it done for a 35-minute episode. It's going to be amazing.
It would be uncharacteristic of us not to go 5 hours for a 35-minute episode.
We will break it into multiple parts.
Yeah. But no, thanks again, seriously, for everybody that came out to the live stream. There was 1 billion people out here tonight. Not everybody was talking, and that's fine. We had a good turnout. So thank you so much for that. Okay, well, we'll be back tomorrow, like Jonesy said, and then Wednesday of next week. And if I uploaded these correctly, because this is why we were 5 minutes late, in full disclosure, I forgot to upload the new credits. I need new credits, and it's got new footage and new people on there. So it's all up to date. I'm going to roll them right now. Hopefully they're right. We'll see you guys tomorrow night.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.